Mr. Smith,
Yeah.
and I too vote yes, the agenda has been approved. Dr. Elder, do we have any submissions for public comment tonight?
Madam President, this evening, we do not have any submissions.
Thank you. That takes us to item number 6, which is presentation of the Peralta Elementary. I'll turn this over to Dr. Elder, who will introduce our presenters tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. This evening, we have from Decker Parish, Sabatini, Janet Lacey, Juan Dorado, and Kevin Maynard to give us an update on the work that has occurred already at Peralta Elementary with our capital work, and give us a preview of what is upcoming. So welcome, and you may take the podium.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Good to see everyone. Board President Garcia, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Elder, thank you for having us tonight. My name is Juan Dorado. I'm a principal and project manager at Decker Parish Sabatini. And then to my right, start with Kevin. Want to introduce yourself?
Hello, yes, I'm Kevin Maynard. I'm a project architect for Peralta Elementary School.
And I'm Janet Lacey, senior architect with Decker Parish Sabatini.
And we are elated to be here with you tonight to present the completed progress thus far on the Peralta Elementary School project. And I have the slide clicker here. Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much. So for today's presentation, or this evening's presentation, we want to go through tonight just our current mission and vision for the project that has been set thus far by our excellent design committee appointed by the schools for the project to make the guiding decisions on each and every step of the project thus far. At which point I will ask for design committee members who are here tonight to just stand and be recognized for your great work thus far on the project. Let's give them a big hand because they've done a really great job. And I'll tell you, we work with quite a few design committees for new school projects throughout the state of New Mexico. And this one is by far one of the best that we've ever worked with. So they should be very proud of themselves. We'll also go through a recap of the design progress to date and what's been completed thus far, an overview of the current site plan and floor plan, as well as some methods taken through the design process and a means of preserving legacy on the project, which was important for the design committee in relation to how to honor and respect the current community and heritage that Peralta has now, ensuring that it will carry forward into the new design. So at every design committee meeting, we always start with our mission and vision, as these are our guiding principles for every decision that we make together as a design team and design committee on the project moving forward. So we always review these and ensure that everything we're doing is in relation to these and respecting these for the students to reach their maximum potential. And then also just ensuring that the mission that we have at Los Lunas Schools to be a premier school district in the state of New Mexico, for exemplifying the high levels of learning for all students. These are things that we are looking to encompass in the new design as we move forward. So a brief overview on the design progress thus far. As we have moved forward on the project, we began design on the project after the completion of the Blue Campus study, which was conducted at the very beginning of the project to determine if a temporary campus was going to be needed while the school construction took place, or if the current construction for the new school could be on the existing Peralta Elementary School campus. It was determined that we had the space and means of constructing the building while students remained on campus, which saved the district quite a bit of money. After that process was completed, we moved forward into the design process, going through discovery, programming, schematic design, design development, and now we are in the construction documents phase, which is shown on purple in the screen. That phase is set for completion, which will conclude our design process on July 27th of next month, so this year. Looking forward to that milestone as we will then begin to move forward into bidding and construction administration. And then after the project's completion and substantial completion is achieved, we will then come back for our 11-month warranty and a post-occupancy evaluation to see how the school is performing after the students have well moved into the new campus. Some things that had to take place prior to construction commencing on the project was an early work package. So the design team has split the progress for the project up into a few packages, one that will accomplish setting temporary provisions for the project moving forward. So the students will have a classroom remaining in operation to not impede progress and process of the school during the construction of the project. So that currently is in contractor selection for that early work, which would be some relocation of portables and site utilities while we complete the final school package construction documents set for completion in July, as mentioned earlier. At that point, when we begin the actual bid phase of the project, construction is set to start August into September with a 13-month construction timeline for the new building itself. Once the new building is complete, students will move into the new building, and then site demolition of the existing facilities on campus can take place to complete the remaining site work for playground, bus access and traffic for parent drop-offs as well. So temporary means and provisions have been provided by the design team during this phase of building completion and completion of site work. So we are on schedule, the overall, making a long story short, moving forward on the current progress of the project. And I got ahead of myself. There, of course, is the construction phase of the project, a slide after I spoke about it. But definitely looking for the final completion of the school site work and building for summer 2025. Okay, at this time, I'll just speak a bit to the occupied campus, and then I'll turn it over to our project architect to give you an update on the current site plan and floor plan of the project. As I mentioned, this is going to be an occupied campus construction. So on your screen is the existing site of Peralta Elementary School. And moving forward, we have coordinated the new building's location with the existing facilities. There will be some early demolition once the contractor begins work to remove the portion of the main building that's located towards the northeast corner. So for those familiar with Peralta Elementary School, from the library, everything up in that top corner of to the northeast of that library will be the first phase of demolition. So the new building footprint space can be made clear for new construction. At this time, I'll turn it over to our project architect, Kevin Maynard, to just walk you through the current site development and the floor plan development of the project.
Hello, thank you. I'm Kevin Maynard. Currently, we have on the site plan 3 access points from the public. One being in the southwest corner is the pre-K parent drop-off section. And in the south, the small loop is the bus drop-off section, and the longer drop-off section to the north. Thank you. Is going to be for the kids grades 1 through 6. So Peralta Elementary School is going to be a major hub for pre-K students. There's going to be 11 classrooms for pre-K, and then 2 for each grades moving up 1 through 6. So this being a major community aspect, there is included a full-size gym with bleachers for community access after hours. There's visitors parking to the southwest, and then overflow parking to the north, which will be used after hours for the gym access. The kindergarten playground will be adjacent to the pre-K wing to the south. And then the playground for students 1st through 6th will be to the north. Okay, taking a closer look at the floor plan. To the south, represented in pink, is the pre-K and K kinder wing. In the middle, represented by the blue color, is the public access point and kind of the communal spaces, including the library, the cafeteria, and the gym to the moving to the west wing, which is a two-story part of the building. On the first floor, there will be 1 through 3 classrooms. The yellow, which is centrally located, is the admin suite. And on the second floor, on the bottom of the screen, is classrooms 3 through 6.
Good evening, everyone. When we were working with the committee, we've met with the design committee probably 12 different times. And one of the most important things we did with them was talk about the look and the feel that they wanted to see in this new school. We had several schemes that we presented to them, and basically they settled on the thematic color scheme for rural roots, giving a nod to both the color schemes, the vegetation, and so forth of that part of the valley. For the board members, this will be a little bit easier to read in your package, but there's several things about the campus that we wanted to give recognition to. When I had my photographer go out and start to shoot several photos of the campus, the one thing he came away and said, I checked with him the day he was down here, and he said, everywhere I went on that campus, there was art. And so we've documented a great deal of the existing artwork that's on the campus, but this begins to give you a little bit of information on the foundation that we use for designing the building, both from a color and a layout standpoint. The floor plan, Kevin covered this pretty well. And for the board members, this is a great explanation of what we tried to do in terms of laying out the different spaces. Based on the color scheme of rural roots, we started to move color schemes around the building, not necessarily in these big blocks, but just to indicate the thematic type of color orientation that we'll be using. Generally, you see in gyms, you see very high color, very strong, dramatic graphics, less so in the classrooms and next to none in the special ed, where you tend to keep a much more mellow, serene environment. So we've started looking at the exhibition spaces, the teaching spaces, the dining, the library, and so forth. This is an example. We use these as inspiration to talk to the committee about the type of things and the color schemes that we might like to implement in different parts of the building, showcasing certain activities, creating wayfinding opportunities, and so forth. They were interested in seeing a rich look in all of the interiors of the building, and we have yet to do a furniture selection, but that's coming later this summer, probably closer to the fall when most of the staff is back on campus on a regular basis. But you can begin to see the gym in the upper right-hand corner, how dramatic and high color and exciting that scheme is. And as you move a little bit further away from the exhibition spaces, you tend to be a little bit more muted. This was a sample of the palette that the committee decided on. We're still in the process of picking out some exterior masonry, both brick and CMU, but we settled on a color scheme that is very evocative of the Southwest geography in the area. One of the things we wanted to cover today is preserving the legacy. I know there's been a lot of concern that the original, what I call the old main building on the campus, there was concern that it might be on the historical register for the state of New Mexico. It is not this building. It is the original old school, which is across the street and currently houses the fire department until their new station is completed. Generally, to be on the register, you need to have a facility that has a special event like it's either an award-winning designer, it has a special place in the history of the region. Something occurred there that is notable, whether it's, you can just imagine the type of things. This building is not on the register, and both of the early studies done on the campus from other firms that were doing either an evaluation or a master plan, they've all recommended that every building on this campus be taken down. While this building has a lot of cachet, and I know, believe me, I know how many people have gone to Peralta. This building is going to be very expensive and very difficult to retrofit, to meet current codes for accessibility, for HVAC, for IT, et cetera. The wood floor in here has been sanded down to the nails at this point. And so despite the fact that it has a great deal of cachet in the community, the recommendation was to actually build a new facility. I'd like to go on to some of the photo documentation. Despite the fact that this will come down, my photographer took about 100 photos on the site. He documented the front of both buildings, the original main that we just saw and the front of the existing admin right now. But if you've ever been to Peralta and you've taken a leisurely look around, there's some fabulous art there. It's really terrific. And what we do typically in a lot of schools is, you're not the first to lose an old grand dame of a school that everybody's fond of. It's not uncommon for us to go in and document murals, other artwork, features of the building, and then replicate them in the new building, either with like a vinyl wallpaper that takes on one of the murals. Sometimes we do transparencies that are applied to long windows where you can see through the window, but there's several pieces here we have ideas for. This is a beautiful mural in the old building, and it's a very large format. And so we started working with the committee to see where we might like to replicate this to give honor to the people who provided art on the facility before. The sunflowers. I don't know. This is a pretty fabulous graphic. And we talked to the committee a little bit today, but we haven't decided exactly where to put this. But a window transparency, either looking out to the bosque or maybe out from the library, would be beautiful with this as a transparency. Those of you who have been out there know how adorable the colored fence is. Again, we have several photos of this that we'd like to replicate. We're just now in the process of deciding where that makes sense. And my personal favorite, if you've seen these mobiles, I don't know who this art teacher is, but these are fabulous. There's two of them. They are fabulous mobiles that are about 30 inches wide and maybe 4 or 5 feet tall. And we intend to relocate both of these using a halo light. If you see these lights, these are like a halo light, only you can get them in all diameters. And we've got a perfect spot for them in a two-story narrow vestibule going into the gym. So we're going to showcase these in the new school. One of the things that came up in our committee meeting today was also providing other opportunities around the school, so that if there's other art teachers that want to do mobiles, we've got the halo light in place. They just need to make the piece of art. One of the early slides we saw was of a concrete design with poetry. That's it. Actually, I had not seen this until my photographer brought back a picture of it. But we talked to the committee about earmarking places on the campus where we could let the contractor know eventually there will be a concrete project here. And for the period of time that will be under construction, the art teacher will have a chance to work with her students, decide what it is they might like to do. There's a couple things we'd like to earmark and a lot of opportunity as we move forward. And with that, I would like to show you a video, unless there's any questions you have before we move. We have done a video that we played at the parent night For those of you who were there, it's pretty fantastic, but it takes about 5 minutes. Any questions that we can answer before we move on? All right.
Board members, you wanna watch the video? Questions? Why don't we watch a video then, if any? board
Okay,
members have
that sounds good.
questions?
Okay, this is a fly through around the site, approaching from the southwest. And you can see the first couple drive aisles are an in and out for the parent drop off for pre-K as well as visitor parking. There's a little horseshoe shaped drive that you can see on the south where the buses will be. And right behind the first bus is one of the pre-K or kindergarten playgrounds. You can get a sense that the wing of classrooms coming towards us, that's 1 story, that's the pre-K K wing. And in the background, you can see the 2-story wing that has 1st through 3rd on the 1st floor and 4th through 6th on the 2nd floor. We've actually got 2 pre-K classrooms, since there will be 11 pre-K and K classrooms here. Some of you may know that this is going to be a hub for the pre-K program in Los Lunas schools, and all the pre-K kids will come here until they graduate, in which case they'll go back to their cluster or their original elementary school. It's just a lot more efficient to put all the pre-K kids in one spot. This is an approach to the front of the building. You basically enter from the southwest as the main entry. Oh, sure.
I did want to just point out that Kevin was speaking earlier, and that administration is centrally located with the parent and drop-off loop. So you have first eyes on, one point of access to the school, security in mind, eyes on, ears on of all the activity entering and exiting the school.
To the north of the east-west upper grades, we have a synthetic turf field that you see in the lower left. I like the guy doing push-ups. It's surrounded by an asphalt running track. And this is the gym on the north side that you can see. The visitor overflow parking is behind us in this particular view. We are looking at the drive aisle that will be the upper grade parent drop off, but this drive aisle also runs along the east property line, and it serves as delivery for the kitchen and refuse. And these tall windows here and covered patio area, that goes into the cafeteria. You can see that's the kitchen door right there to the south of the cafeteria. And again, the pre-K classroom and playground. We should really put this to music, don't you think? We've kept landscaping pretty much to a minimum. I know there's some pretty great old trees on this site, but one of the things we struggled with was, number one, shoehorning a new building in between the existing buildings. Once we figured out it was possible to keep the campus occupied, it's going to be a tough 12 or 14 months when they're under construction. It'll be very tight. And this is a small site to start with. General rule of thumb is any campus for an elementary school should be about 10 acres. And this one is 7. And so we're going to be keeping 2 schools working on here during the period of construction. And it's a fairly close order drill, but possible. That's really the end of the video. Any board members have questions?
Thank you. I like that visual because other than the overlay that we saw a couple of months ago, it was harder to make it out. So this is just really easy to see what it is. All right, gentlemen, I'll turn it over to you for questions.
Madam President.
Go ahead.
I like the fact that we're not using the blue school or a temporary siding, because I know it takes a lot of money and time. And so I'm glad we're gonna do that. And so you're saying the actual start date is gonna be this August? An actual construction?
Okay.
Board President Garcia, members of the board, Superintendent Elder. In response to that question, that is correct. So everything is dependent upon, of course, when we receive the permit, PSCOC reviews as well, and funding for construction approval. However, the bid process to commence forward will take place at the completion of the construction documents post receival of the permit. So with the construction documents completed in July, you're looking at into August, receiving a permit, then going out to bid August to late August with a contractor selection anticipated by September.
Yeah, and I mean, it's and I like the fact to where you said you're keeping the kids involved in some of the things that are gonna happen with the concrete stuff. And I think it was really important to the community too, that we keep a lot of that art, because there's a lot of stuff there that needs to be kept and, you know, just for later, you know, people to watch it. So, and we're going with artificial turf, which is, means no sprinklers.
That is correct. So it won't require irrigation to stay alive on that.
Yeah,
Yes.
it does.
Or a lawnmower.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be beautiful. I just, you know, can't wait for it to start. I know it seems like it's been taking a while, but I guess that's just the process, right?
It seems like a long time to you, but we're used to working on, for years on something. What a lot of people don't realize is by the time you get to this point in a project, it's been 10 years. It was the twinkle in somebody's eye a decade ago, and then you formulate it, then you get the funding, and then it all takes a great deal of time. I wanted to mention one thing when you brought up the question about artificial turf. We have kept two things at the top of our mind. One is designing a school that will benefit the district and all the elementary kids who are going to go here. But the other is this school functions as a largely a community center. And so while you never see an elementary school that has a full-size gym with a wood floor and bleachers, we're doing that in this particular situation because of the involvement of the community in this Or the screen one.
That's the best. I think so.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting back to order at 6:52 PM. For those streaming on YouTube, we did lose power here at central office. I've been assured that we're back onto the stream, so I'd like to proceed with the meeting. I believe Mr. Bennett had just finished comments, unless Mr. Bennett, you have more questions or comments for the architects.
No, just commending the fact that you're gonna get the kids involved and keeping the art. I know it's something Tiffany wants to do, is always keep the kids involved in any project we've got going on at district, but so I thank her for that.
All right, on this end of the board, Mr. Hidon, you want to go next? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Vickers.
Madam Chair, there was a couple of things. One is, you mentioned an asphalt crack. Is that standard for our elementary schools? Asphalt versus rubberized crack?
Typically, elementary schools do not have tracks at all. One of the things we worked out, we had several meetings with first responders, and that's something we do as a company early in the design to make sure that anything we're putting in place, whether it's the water lines, the access points, the width of the drive, the thickness of the paving, we always make sure that, number one, we can get an ambulance to the front door, that we give the fire department access all the way around the site to the greatest degree possible, and that we know where the fire hydrants are. One of the actual real reason for that paved area is to give the fire department access from the existing vehicle fence on 47 so they can get into the north side of the site. We went back and forth. Should it be gravel? Should it be a percolating paver? The issue of gravel, it's a projectile, it's messy. We really need to have a paved surface out there that's usable for the kids or the adults, and not something that, can be thrown or is just plain old messy. So we worked a great deal with the first responders to make sure they know what they have in the way of access to the site. They know where the hold points are going to be. And from a security standpoint, they know what provisions we put in place. We would love to do a rubber running track, but at this point in time, it's not typical for elementary schools to have a track at all.
That is around this artificial turf field.
Yes, sir.
That's what that is.
And one of the things I forgot to mention, I always have something to add as you get to know me better. Because it's a community facility, we talked about the location of the pre-K, the K playground, the upper grades for the elementary school playground. But another thing that we've added is an obstacle course on the exterior. You've probably seen them in larger parks where you've got a balance beam, a chin-up beam. You've got a series of outdoor rated equipment that's suitable for adults to after you're done running, you go the obstacle course and so forth. So we've added some of those in there, and we have yet to do a meeting with the committee, but which is scheduled for next week, to go through all the playground equipment, including the obstacle course items that are more suitable for adults or upper age kids.
And speaking of that, do you have physical education?
We do, most definitely. Right now, they're practicing archery in their gym, and we're hoping they don't do that in the new gym.
So there's the thing in the video. Is the campus looks very porous. Between the fences and the building, there's gaps, access, and there's Florida ceiling flats all throughout. And considering what happened in Tennessee, that much glass and seemingly very easy access to the building is a concern. So I'm wondering how you're addressing security.
We have actually not only met with the first responders, but with the security director for the district, whose name I don't remember, and Sergeant Chapa, who is stationed at the school. And it's hard to tell in this particular drawing, but we have vehicle gates. Let's see if I can not be too shaky. We have vehicle gates at all vehicle entries to the to the site, both on the right-hand side, the north-south drive aisle to the east. That's a vehicle gate. Both ends of the bus drop-off, which is the horseshoe, those have vehicle gates as well as the double entry. I'd already mentioned the vehicle gate at the existing drive pad on 47. So we shut off the campus. When we actually met a follow-up meeting today with the fire marshal for the village of Peralta, and he had asked for knock boxes. He's very concerned about, he's not the kind of fireman who destroys the building to get in and get to the issue. He's very careful. And so he talked about where he would like knock boxes. We're not really putting in any electric or automatic gates just from a cost standpoint. But to your issue with the building itself, you know where the main entry is in the south, from the southwest. We also have an entry off the cafeteria that goes to the east. And it's not so much an entry per se, but you've got a lot of glazing there that from the dining room, you get a great vista to the bosque. And not only that, there's an outdoor covered area where you could have tables and eat outside when the weather is right. The third entry that we have is from the northwest, and that is able to be locked off. When you open the gym for just public use, we have a way to lock it off on the inside so that when the public has a game, they come in through that north entry. They've got access to drinking fountains and toilet rooms and the gym. So there's a way to block them from coming in and wandering the halls of the school. One of the things that the director of security for the district talked about was bullet-resistant glazing. And I recently saw a demonstration at Caliber's in Albuquerque, and I'm not somebody who gives a lot of credence to bullet-resistant film, but I saw a demonstration by a company who makes two types of film, at least. One is a bullet-resistant film, and the other is what they call riot film. And riot film won't stop a 9 caliber bullet, but it'll keep people who are walking down the street throwing bricks at storefront. And it delays you from getting in. If you have laminated glass, when you break it, it shatters and it hangs there like a drape, and then it just falls. It can fall. But the riot film and the bullet resistant film do exactly what they say. And no one was more surprised than I was. And so to your point, we've considered putting in bullet resistant glazing at the front entry. If you can't get into the building, a lot of times when these incidents occur, you shoot your way in. If you're not already in the building, you shoot your way in through the front door. So we thought we would do the bullet resistant film at the front entry, both the outside as well as the inside glazing of the vestibule. So if you get through one, you've still got to go through another. And there is one window at that point where the admin area is that we thought we would put bullet resistant glazing on. You want what? Oh, sure. I'm not done. The riot glass, we thought, the riot is more for vandals. And so we thought we would put riot glass, and these films only go up to about 8 feet. There's no point in putting this expensive thing up high. The issue is to protect somebody who's standing and can be shot at, or, whatever is in the way of a projectile, and to slow people down. The bullet resistant glazing definitely slows you down, because the demonstration I saw was a 9 caliber handgun at about 12 feet, shot into a sheet of glass 4x8 a dozen times, and it shattered the glass. It doesn't keep the glass from breaking, but then they took a baseball bat to it, and the bullet resistant glazing kept its integrity. The reason we mentioned it today to the fire department is in Uvalde, for instance, they broke classroom windows and pulled kids out through the classroom windows. So we are not putting this film on any classrooms. If the fire department wants to get in, they've got that capability to go right through the glass where there's occupied areas. Any other concerns from a security standpoint? It's hard to see in this particular format, but we've got a number of hold points in the building where we can close things off. We've been very careful about sight lines, And it's kind of a two-edged sword because the sight lines that the first responders need to look down a corridor and see what's going on, that's the same sight line that an active shooter uses. And so there's no ideal situation, but we've been very preemptive about talking with the district as well as first responders on what they might like to see. Okay.
So, yeah, can understand. That for the, et cetera. Do the classroom windows go to the floor? No. No, so for the like 5, 6 feet and down is all you need on those bulletproof ones. They're not gonna shoot the upper ones out and climb over the top. So, but I would definitely favor the bulletproof versus the riot glass, because we've seen incidents where access was gained that way.
Absolutely. And there was some great points. I just kind of wanted to summarize as far as our CPTED review goes. So we have in-house certified experts in crime prevention through environmental design. And so just addressing your concern in regards to the number of access points into the building. And Janet had some great comments in regards to how we've reviewed that with the district security as well as emergency responders. The entire concept of the school in regards to security is layers of security and a method of buying time. And so there is one public entrance into the building, which is from the front, as mentioned earlier, and that is directly adjacent through a secure vestibule into the school to the administration area. So any public visitors arriving to the school have a single point of access to the campus and a single point of access to the building. All other entrances are behind a campus perimeter fence. And then within that campus perimeter fence, there is a secondary fence layer around the play areas. So that layer of security as you come into the building itself. In that front vestibule area where Janet was discussing the bullet resistant film, the riot proof and bullet resistant film is both designed with the laminate to stay intact regardless of a penetration of a projectile. So sharing your concern in regards to other incidents that have happened around the country, any projectile that enters that glass, they went to it with a bat or another type of blunt force object and were still not able to gain entry into those areas. So prioritizing those around, as Janet mentioned, the public entrances, and then the step down around the secondary entrances, which will still prevent access in the case of a projectile. But then for the emergency responders, access and interaction in removing students from a classroom, those other areas as recommended by security discussions should remain unlaminated.
All right, so Mr. Hidon.
So I think what Mr. Vickers was asking, and I'm gonna ask it a different way. How much of a difference is it cost-wise going with a laminate or what he's asking? Is it gonna be $100? Is it gonna be $1,000? I mean, and I can understand what his concern is. Being a board member isn't easy. You hear about these shootings all over the country and we're supposed to learn from them. Yeah, we have the front door locked, but the back doors are open. And I'm not saying this school, but just stuff that we've learned in the past. And I understand your concern, Gabe. We should have gone further with some more questions on that, but is it feasible or, I mean,
It's simply a money thing. I can tell you the laminated glass is going to keep the pieces of glass held together, but it's not going to prevent somebody from sticking a projectile in and ripping down. It's like a curtain once it breaks. The riot glass and the riot film and the bullet resistant film do keep their integrity. And I know I've asked about the cost. The bullet resistant film is about $70 a square foot. The riot film is about $35 a square foot. So there's no substitute for stopping somebody in their tracks. And Ordinarily, I probably wouldn't have really entertained it, but every school district we work with, every school we work with, they always ask the questions, what about stopping bullets? And this is it's a pretty reasonable solution. It doesn't really change the look of the glazing from the outside. So if you put it up to 6 or 8 feet, it will have a different look as it goes up to the ceiling or wherever we stop the glazing. But it's a small price to pay for that kind of security, and everybody's taking it into account now. So it's not an astonishing amount of money, but we're open to suggestion if you'd like to see the bullet resistant film in all the vulnerable areas. That's a possibility. Mr. Haroun?
As
You bring up a good point, because we have not started putting together bid lots. And once we get film on the windows, that's one thing in the locations that we want them. But we can always do a bid lot to say, we call for the riot glass at these 2 back doors. What's the upcharge for putting in bullet resistant? And so that's an opportunity, and you could decide at that point in time. I think we all agree that, the entry from the north to the gym is a little bit protected from the roadway serving the school, and mischief could happen there. Yeah, it is still behind the fence, and then from the ditch bank, the issue with the ditch bank is it's up a little bit higher. So you're kind of looking down at the school just a little bit. And we can talk about, doing a bid lot to see what the bullet resistant glazing, once they mobilize, it may not be that much.
So this video that you presented to us was presented on Family Night? When was that?
A month and a half ago, a month ago? The 28th? April 28th, so I'm hearing late April.
Okay, now it's making sense to me because I'm getting feedback on it now. And I didn't know where we were at. So that maybe that's us as a board, as a district failing not to making, I spoke with 3 council members, and as a matter of fact, I spoke with one early last week for this, and he was politicking for another issue. But I didn't have any answers for them. As a matter of fact, I was pressing our superintendent, and she says we're further than we thought we were. And I didn't understand what she was saying. Now I understand. So did we still have a community committee that was involved in this? Because let me look back at the date. 2020, I know we had a committee. That's when COVID hit. We were gone in 21. But there was community members that I would speak with after they would meet, and I just stopped hearing from them. Was there still a community committee?
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Elder. So I'll speak on the behalf of the committee. It was something that the district put together. So there may have been a committee previous. There was a lot of different steps in this project, and one of those was an ed spec and feasibility study that was done and completed back in 2020. So I have the feasibility dated May 18th of 2020, and there was a committee for that. So that was a time of NCA that came in and evaluated the whole school, met with teachers, met with all the program directors to see what we needed to do at Peralta Elementary. And that's where part of that was the demo of the original building. And so from there, we got to get an architect involved, which DPS comes into play after that RFP process of hiring a design architect. They take that feasibility study and ed spec and use that as a platform to design their current building. We have a new committee that was established for the design of the building. So there was the planning of it that the initial planning, and then we went into design. Our design committee involved different members. It involved some of our cabinet members, our principal, secretary, our librarian, our PE coach, teachers, and a parent stepped up to volunteer to be part of that committee. So we did make it available to different avenues of our department and the community and the teachers and staff that serve on that site. We also spent time having specific committee meetings with each department that has a play in Peralta Elementary, such as our IT department, our security department. We had a special librarian committee meeting, our PE committee meeting, our admin meeting, and we had people that would directly affect their job and how they interact with our students, participate in the design of this project. So there was multiple people as far as this design goes, and a parent did step up to be a part of that committee in the design. If that answers your question about the committee.
Okay, the committee I was asking for was a community committee that they had.
And that was the original committee.
And then also, I mean, I
Yeah,
don't know. what
so that was for the feasibility study and the ed spec. So that's the initial planning that is required from PSFA as part of this project, is we do that study first. And that's when they met with the community, they met with the the teachers, the different grade levels, and they look at the school and how it functions and what they need to function as a campus. And so that's where a lot of community involvement was put in, that you're probably referring to is that committee for the feasibility study and ed spec. Mhm.
But we're already over here. So I think if I couldn't answer these questions this last 6 weeks, and the town of Peralta probably knows more than I do. Maybe we need to make a presentation of them, include them.
And that's one
because
thing we
they're
did.
asking questions that.
So one thing we did extend an invite at our last presentation of the board meeting, where I was able to present our current layout of where we were at in the design phase then. And you saw a few layouts of the school, not as detailed because we weren't at that process yet, but we did announce that we would be presenting at the parent night at Peralta Elementaries. And we did invite the community that wanted to participate. And I will say the Mayor O'Gean did attend that, so he can view, and that's where they're getting their information from, is because he did attend that parent night and was able to speak with the architect team about what we're doing. I was able to speak with him at what's going to be happening in the near future and the planning as you saw today.
Ryan's the only one I haven't talked to the mayor, or I've talked to councilman. Maybe it'd be a good idea that I would request our superintendent reach out to Peralta and bring them up to speed, because the information I gave them was not close to this.
Yeah, and we've also met with, as Juan was saying earlier, we've met with the fire department twice. We've also included local law enforcement. We've had some Los Lunas LPD that attended meetings to help us with this design process as well.
So in order to maybe address what Mr. Hidon is wanting, and of course, what the board and superintendent administration can maybe do, Tiffany, is maybe somewhere in between the E and F on the bidding phase, right before we start construction, maybe reaching out to a presentation to the Peralta Council, so that they now, because I'm thinking maybe by 10/23, which is on here, there might be some updated dates and stuff that you could fill them in as to what's happening in their community. Either through a
Absolutely.
committee meeting or through
And
some kind of presentation.
I will get with Dr. Elder on what we'd like to present to them and how we present that to the council as well.
Would that be sufficient? Yeah.
I mean, they're a stakeholder, they're right there. I think it's important to
Right.
include them, because the question they had for me, I could not answer. And maybe 10 minutes would be more than enough time, straight stuff up.
Well, I know you're going to be back in front of us for a board approval sometime between September and October, I'm assuming.
Yes, and that's correct. And I would like to kind of clarify some of the dates that we're giving, like the August date of construction. What we look at is, when we look at a construction project, is the start of the RFP process. So that will start in August, not necessarily a shovel in the ground, We do have some preliminary work in bringing in a portable and some temporary play areas, asphalt that's going to go down to help when construction's actually beginning that will support the site. However, we will start the RFP process of construction. That's part of our construction process, is starting the RFP bidding process where it'll go out to open RFP bid. And there's a length of time that has to stay open for people to respond. Then there's a length of time for that review and selection of a contractor. After that is done, then we will come to the board with our recommendation, and you'll get to see that who we bring before you as far as that bidding process goes. So you are looking at in October, November, and it also will have to go through PSFA, and they'll present it to their council as well, since they are a stakeholder in this project.
Mr. Smith, I know you're on the line. Do you have any questions for Tiffany and or the architects?
I just have a couple of comments. One, I did get the opportunity to thank Tiffany for the overlay that she provided. Thank you for that. I would ask for it all back, and she provided that. In watching the video though, I know there were some concerns about the west entrance off of Highway 47. And it may have been discussed, but I'm not sure that it was, to my understanding anyway. What is that entrance used for? Is that a staff parking lot, or is that strictly for emergency?
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Elder, in response to that question, Highway 47 access to the school site is dedicated for emergency access only. So the school primary traffic for parent pickup and drop off, bus pickup and drop off, that will all occur from the southern side of the campus.
What is the best window we could put there? Maybe you can tell us what that, in your opinion, that would suffice what some of the concerns are that I have as far as the safety goes. But whatever the best possible window for that is. And it looks like the entrances with the interior gates and everything provides a second layer, which I do like. I do like that there's one point of entry into the school. So that aspect of it, as far as what you've explained and shown with your video and stuff, I really appreciate. So I believe that's all the comments that I have. I had some more, but they were all taken care of. So thank you.
Thank you.
And
Go ahead.
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Elder, I just wanted to mention, point of clarification earlier, this is going to be a pre-K hub for the east side pre-K hub. So not for the entire pre-K. Yes, exactly. Correct. Thank you.
And that nice video that you did put together for us, is that something, Dr. Elder, we might be able to get on our webpage? If not now, sometime in the future, to show what our vision is for that area?
Absolutely. Madam President, we are happy to deliver that to Tiffany and yeah, we have delivered to Tiffany. So if you'd like to host that on your website, by all means, at the discretion of Peralta, Las Lunas Schools. That'd be great. Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you so much for having us tonight. We really appreciate, again, the progress made by the design committee, as well as the entire team here at Las Lunas Schools. And we look forward to continuing on with a new project to be built for you guys. Thank you.
Be safe going back at the store.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe that brings us to item number 7 on the agenda, discussion and action to amend policy sections A and B. If we could, gentlemen, I know that Madam Superintendent did put on our desk some feedback that was given to the board by, I believe some of this was from staff and some of this was from administration. I want to give you an opportunity, of course, to review some of these. It was in an email that was also sent out to Mr. Kennedy, who is also present at this time to answer any questions. I believe today would be an action item to accept sections A and B, but I want to have that discussion first. Mr. Smith, I'm going to turn it over to you first, and then if Dr. Elder wants to add anything, I'll let her step up second. So do you have any comments, Mr. Smith?
No, the only comment I have on the proposed amendments to the those board policies, and I didn't see any major major discrepancies in them. But then again, I'll leave that to Mr. Kennedy to determine if there's something that we should be rethinking. But I didn't have a problem with it, but I'm glad that all the board has a copy of it, and we thank you for that. And I think it's open for discussion, and they need to move on items A and B. So if there's any legitimate questions about what changes should be made, I think we can address them to Mr. Kennedy, and we can just go forward from there unless Dr. Elder has an input other than that.
Mr. Kennedy, why don't I turn it over to you and you can share what you have.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Elder. I'm John Kennedy. For those of you who may not have met me, we have reviewed sections A and B, which are part of the model policy system promoted by the New Mexico School Boards Association, and the Los Lunas Schools has joined that system. It's a subscription service that the School Boards Association offers to school districts in New Mexico. The policies have been vetted through the National School Boards Association over the past 10 or 15 years and are generally pretty standardized. They are not cookie cutter, and we don't intend them to be cookie cutter policies, but the board has the authority and the discretion to decide to modify these policies. The idea is, however, to have a comprehensive board policy manual. One of the things that Joe Guillen at the New Mexico School Boards Association has done is assisted school districts in assuring that you have a comprehensive set of policies that really serve your interests and do the things that local school boards do in adopting policy. Your primary duty as a school board is to adopt policy for implementation by the school district, and that allows you to have the foundational principles for operation and maintenance of the schools. So to the extent that we reviewed section A last time I was here, would you like me to go section by section through section B briefly? I mean, it's up to the pleasure of the board. And
section B has more to do with the operations of the school board.
correct. Yeah, they're more of the governance policies. They aren't really the ones for the nuts and bolts of education and personnel and students that come in later, but these are the governance policies. So I am here to assist you in any way you care.
Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
In our possession, the board were a little less, and now we have these proposed changes to just particular sentences and or paragraphs. What I would recommend is we've already seen section B, or we should, and we should have an opinion on section B. Maybe we can just go through the changes that are being proposed to section B, and then discuss whether we want to vote on it from there instead of going through the entire section, which we should have already done.
Board members agree? And I agree. So I guess the document we have in front of us at this time, Dr. Elder, was feedback from an individual person, one
Yes.
person.
Madam President, that is correct, and that is only on section B. There's also an email with some feedback on section A.
And these were community feedback responses.
B is community feedback, A is staff.
Okay.
Okay, I don't have anything on section A. But the comments on section B are from Dr. Gardner. Relate to the school board's legal status, section B-0150 of the policy manual. Really nothing in there is terribly dramatic. There are a few wording changes proposed. I don't have a problem with those suggestions if the board chooses to adopt them. The policies themselves are relatively standardized. So if changes are made based upon local comments, one of the things I recommend to you, and you're actually required to do it, is take off the copyright symbol that's on the model policies because you have modified those policies locally. So to the extent that these are recommendations, I don't see anything here that causes me any heartburn. They are relatively, there are a few details that are changed, but don't really change the substance of any of the policies. Does the board have any members of the board have any questions about the suggested modifications?
I have four things on B that I wanted to bring out.
Okay, so not necessarily from the recommendations that were handed to us today.
Just,
Okay. Okay.
thing that-
So just before I turn it over to you, Mr. Vickers, are there any board members that want to discuss either in detail or a little bit more information on the suggestions provided by the public? Go ahead.
Policy dramatically or in the spirit of the policy, and I didn't see that. And did it make it something that we couldn't necessarily follow or hold ourselves accountable to? And I didn't see that either. And hearing Mr. Kennedy's comments about it didn't change them drastically makes sense to me. So my comments on the proposed changes that we have currently are, I agree that we should include them. We should include those changes in as far as section B goes.
There is one, excuse me,
Go ahead.
Madam Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Elder, there's one comment on the second page of these, the feedback, the 3-page feedback, and that is under voting method. It says B 2050. How are tie votes resolved if the number of board members present is even? That is an issue that is resolved legally by, if there's a board that conducts a vote, you have an even number of board members, a motion is made, seconded, and it's a tie vote, the motion fails. So you would simply have to change the motion or go on to something else. So that one is resolved legally by a tie vote is no action.
And some of these were questions more so than a change to the actual verbiage.
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
So to move on the process a little bit, keep in mind, gentlemen, that we're looking at this comments by the public. Mr. Vickers, what comments do you want to make?
Okay, so I also have a comment on B 0150. And that is that on the third line of that it says the Public Education Commission is mentioned there. And that Public Education Commission no longer has any jurisdiction over public schools. It is simply a commission that deals with charter schools. So I don't think it should even be mentioned in there. We are not accountable to that commission. So I was recommending that we would remove that.
I would recommend it be retained only for the purpose that there are charter schools that are actually supervised by the public school district. If it's a district organized public charter school, the Public Education Commission would have supervisory authority over it. So there is some connection between local public school boards and the PEC. So I don't see that it harms you to keep that organization in your policy.
Well, okay. That this has been a complication of other issues.
Go ahead.
If I may, with all due respect, Mr. Kennedy, we only have one charter school in the county of Valencia, and it is not authorized by a local school district. It is authorized by the Public Education Commission.
Okay.
And so I think it's important that we keep clear delineation between the PEC's role and the public school districts or the LEA's role within our policies.
Okay. I don't have a problem with deleting that last clause. Just to make it suited to the actual circumstances here in Los Lunas. So you would put a period after public education department, period, and then the final clause of that first sentence would be deleted. Right.
Establishment of public education department, period,
Yes.
Wait a minute.
or with powers as provided by law, taking out Public Education Commission,
The words and
right?
public.
Yes, but you
And let the
retain,
rest of it in.
that's correct. That's a good clarification. Thank you.
Do you want to address? Okay, so gentlemen, I have an amendment to B-0150. I'm hearing it in form of a motion that we accept that one policy number with the amendment taking out the Public Education Commission. Is that correct, Mr. Vickers?
Yes.
And that's a motion?
Yes, removing 4 words.
Okay, so I have a motion. Do I get a second?
Ms. Garcia?
Yes.
Or are we motioning to approve that particular policy with and PEC removed?
Yeah, Madam President, I agree. Are we going to go through this before we amend it, or we're going to do one individually?
In this case, Mr. Vickers has made a motion on this one individually to remove it, to approve the policy, but remove that language. But we could also remove the language and move on to the next one and adapt the whole section. I guess that's where the questions are, right? So are we gonna want to go individually, or are we gonna adapt the whole thing and then go in and make amendments?
Amendment. And then when it comes time to approve sections A and B, then we can discuss any differences that a board member may have. Otherwise, we're going to be going. Back. We'll be discussing like a lot. That's just my opinion on that. We can do the will of the board.
So Mr. Vickers, do you want to withdraw your motion and take it up after we adapt it and then change it?
I guess so. We can do it that way.
Okay, so I'll make note of your change to B-150. What else?
I have 3 more comments.
Go ahead.
And this is not necessarily an amendment. 0200 board powers and responsibilities, the second page. All local, about halfway down, all locals, school board members must receive a total of 5 hours of annual training. And then further down, skip the big paragraph and the next smaller paragraph. They shall attend 5 hours of annual training, it's mentioned again. Or what? There's no teeth. That's like the legislature approving a law without any penalty.
And they do that.
Yeah,
Madam Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Elder, that's a reference to a state regulation in the New Mexico Administrative Code that was adopted by the PED 10 or 15 years ago, and it doesn't have any teeth. So to the extent that the Public Education Department could suspend or revoke a license for failure to comply with that, it doesn't say that in that regulation. But conceptually, there could be teeth, but it's not stated that way.
So I would request that our superintendent would request from the state Secretary of PED that we put teeth in that there should be something. And we're not licensed though, so I'm not sure what the teeth would be. But if you're going to say it, then there has to be some consequence for not doing it.
Right.
That's my only point there on that one.
The Public Education Department has authority to remove board members pursuant to state statute, but I doubt that this would ever be a basis for removal of a board member.
So the board basically polices ourselves.
Right.
So if the board notices this has become an issue, perhaps we would look at some type of policy that we would police ourselves, whether it be a public sanction, whether it be a board action of some sort. But I don't think, as you've stated, that there's anything that mandates it by law. It would just be more something that the board would police ourselves.
You could add that as a basic enforcement policy. There are statutory powers to recall board members. There are statutory powers to suspend the board if the board doesn't do anything and the PED thinks you need to. But to the extent that it's a state regulation that was adopted a couple of decades ago, but there was not a provision for enforcement placed in that regulation.
That be pointed out to them. Okay, my third one is on 0750, and Dr. Gardner addressed this same one also, which in this day and age, I can't believe this is worded like this. Second page. Board member ethics, anyway, work through the superintendent, make criticisms of school administration and or L personnel only to him. And Dr. Gardner's recommendation is only to the superintendent. Right. So I think that's good wording. We definitely need to change that one. And my last one is 80. Oh, well, this one is 1400. And there's just a blank here for regular board meetings. And I'm assuming we need to put something in there upon final approval of this policy.
And I'll turn that over to Dr. Elder. I know this is some of the information we were providing to NMSB.
Typically, board policies on the schedule for board meetings say the board will meet twice a month on the second Tuesday and fourth Tuesday, or it might say the third Wednesday of the month is the board meeting date, that kind of thing. There's no consequence for leaving a blank in that policy, but the public should know when your regular meetings are usually called. And you're required under the Open Meetings Act to give notice of every meeting if it's not specified in that policy.
Website for public review. is that we hadn't input our information yet. And so ultimately that will be there. In addition, we are very diligent about keeping our meeting schedule up to date on the website, as well as posting those board meetings at all of our school sites and all of our district facilities.
Good.
We want to make sure that everyone knows when our meetings are. And so having the blank there, we have many other ways to make sure the public knows.
But that will be included.
That should be input,
Okay.
yes. And I believe, Mr. Kennedy, the policy service has requested that information and I've provided it, so.
Right. Good. And that, so it'll go up on the website for, the policy service maintains a website of all your policies once they're adopted by the board.
Okay, so I did not catch, what did we decide to do regarding this specific list of changes that were proposed by David Gardner? Did we propose that they were good, they weren't a problem, and we could incorporate them, or that what we already had is good enough and we don't need to incorporate them? I don't.
Well, let's address that, but before we do, I'd like to have the other board members, if there's any input they have, and then we can address that when the motion comes. None, okay.
I just got a question on that B 1581, it's a dollar amount approved by the board, and I'm not sure if that's one that was changed and it's already been done or has it been updated?
What number is it?
1581?
1581. Is it, are you talking about this list?
No, it's actually on the. Yeah, the original policy. Yeah, it's an exhibit.
I don't have it in front of me.
You know, we're working on what we're doing with the exhibits up on the webpage, so it's not necessarily the policy. This is not what we're approving tonight. This is
Yeah.
administration's role. So our role is just the policy, not any of the exhibits or forms that are within the document you have in front of you.
But when that policy doesn't have a dollar amount that we have to approve or do not approve of
Well,
the
show me
dollar
where you
amount.
see it.
Well, I think it's $2,000 in the one they sent.
This one, purchases exceeding?
Yes.
Okay. So that, again, is not what we're gonna approve tonight. Because that's administrative document. That's up to administration to call that. It might be that number, it might be something else, I don't know, but
But I thought we voted on that before to raise them as a policy.
which I would, go ahead, Dr. Albert.
Madam President, I will say that made us stop breathing at first, and so we did look into what this exhibit means, and you are correct, this is not policy, this is not board policy, this is a recommended exhibit by NMSBA. Whereas we create our own regulations and exhibits in our district administratively. But what this is referring to, it's the third bullet from the bottom, that it states that purchases exceeding $2,500 that can be made only from one source. And this is in regard to executive sessions. So that dollar amount is only in regards to what can be discussed in an executive session, not the threshold of what it, we can't bring you every purchase over $2,500 or you finance committee would last for days.
And it's also statutory. So it's simply a reciting what's in the procurement code. I mean, the Public Open Meetings Act.
Mr. Smith, anything else as a board member you want to have us look at under section B?
No, the information that we did receive from the is suggested as what, when we make our motion, we can make a motion to accept with or without subtracting NP, PEC. We can discuss those as they come up, but I don't think that we've accepted anything to this point. So they are just suggestions. I just wanted clarification that they didn't change the spirit of anything, which they have not. So if our policies read correctly with the suggested amendments that we have in place today, that we've talked about today, and they still have the meaning that they have, then that's what we should vote on as well. But I just want to clarify that we have not accepted any of the proposed changes until we do that part.
Okay, and before that motion comes, I just wanted to ask a question about your trademark. So if we are making changes as we go and we remove that trademark at the top, does that make it any less or more important?
No.
I mean, I understand what you're doing, but we're not hurting ourselves by making a change that's going to affect the trademark, correct?
Explain what that's all about.
Okay.
The New Mexico School Boards Association adopted the National School Boards Association Model Policy Service, and the copyright symbol, the little C in the first line, simply references the fact that these were documents whose origin is in an entity that drafted them back east. So to the extent that the National School Boards Association retains a copyright on these precise policies, if you modify them, they're no longer the same they're not the same as the copyrighted document anymore. So it's removing the copyright symbol doesn't change the legal effect of it. They're your policies. That's right. Doesn't change the legal effect at all. You could, yeah, the school board could copyright the policies should you choose to do so, but it would require at the beginning of your policy set, like a disclaimer or a note at the bottom saying anywhere where we've said this is copyrighted by the Wilson School Board, you should note it.
Okay, so in front of us, gentlemen, you also had some suggestions for section A, and I know Mr. Kennedy said he didn't have that in front of him. These were submitted to, I believe, to the superintendent by administration or staff or whatever. Okay, so one of the things that I did want to discuss is the mission, vision, and mission statement. I agree with the recommendations that have been set here that I thought it would be our district's vision and belief statement. The one that was in here was nice and pretty, but Los Angeles Schools has already adapted a mission statement. So of course, I leave it up to the board, but I would say that if we amend section A1, it should be with our mission statement and vision statement.
Certainly.
And there is some language that was given to us by staff that I feel meets that vision statement. Is that correct, Dr. Elder? Okay. Any comments or questions about that?
No, but I will point out there is a recommendation for section B at the bottom of that sheet. That
Right.
we address on B, so.
Okay, so just to get us to section A. We've already read it aloud as a board. There's been a recommended change to input our own vision and mission statements. I need a motion at this time for section A. So Mr. Bennett has made a motion to approve section 8 with the recommended changes by staff to vision and mission. Is that how you want the motion? I got a motion by Mr. Bennett.
You're doing all the recommendations on A all the way down.
I got a motion on A with this change to the vision and mission. We haven't got to B yet, but there was not an item 3. Mr. Smith? Were you gonna say something?
No, I was gonna second it, provided that the change from the to section 8 that we come in front of us from any.
Yes.
If I may just clarify, staff recommendation is under section A0000. as you can see on the screen. Recommendation number 1 is for us to use our own vision and mission, which is on the poster behind Mr. Kennedy's head. Additionally, staff recommendation is to amend the section, if you want to scroll down just a bit, John, the section for students to reflect our beliefs about students that include every student deserves access to a robust, rigorous, and complete curriculum at their grade level. And then the following statements all the way down to the number 3. Additionally, in section A0000, staff recommends to add the following statement to beliefs about teachers. That every employee deserves to be supported in staying current in the most effective practices in their field, implementing new initiatives, and perfecting their ability to improve student learning. And so that concludes the recommendations of staff for the very first section in A.
And 3 in the bullet is new language.
Correct. Number 2 and number 3, and actually the vision mission would come from our own vision and mission. So those would be substitutions.
So Mr. Bennett, what's your motion?
Yeah, to cut and paste our original and add this 2 and 3 into it.
Madam Chair, may I make a suggestion that the motion include that the modified policy be adopted and attached to the minutes of this meeting so the public can see the changed policy. Dr. Elder, you have any objection to that? I'm sorry?
Do you? We do the language and put it in there. We're done.
I'll do whatever will help. So, yes. I'll work with Dr. Elder to get the.
To the NMSBA policies. And then there's a drop down that you pick our district. So when it gets to the point that it is up on the NMSBA site, I do think that having our district customizations that we're allowed to make reflected on that site will be important. In the meantime, we can make those changes on our documents on our website, but eventually I do think it needs to be linked.
Okay.
Right.
Makes sense. Okay, so I still just have a motion. It did change a little bit, Mr. Smith, because you asked that question. It looks like we're dealing with section A to include the mission statement, the amended beliefs about students, the amended beliefs about teachers, and I believe in that was it.
Okay, so do we have a motion for that?
Yes, Mr. Bennett made that motion. Okay, so Mr. Smith seconded. You got a question, Mr. Hill?
Already said that, I wonder.
I guess the motion is to to cut and paste our vision and mission statement there and add on what was put by the staff here for number 2 and number 3.
Yes, you're substituting your own mission statement for the standardized mission statement in the policy service, and that's perfectly acceptable. And you're adding to that standard mission statement as described. So I don't have a problem with the motion at all. It's just, it customizes it for the Los Lunas Public Schools.
I got a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
Madam President.
Yes.
So there's a small section at the bottom that corrects a typo. Very bottom, 0650. And the parent section. Can we include that in this motion?
Mr. Bennett, do you want to include the section
that's fine.
650
That's fine, I think.
to clear up a typo? So Mr. Bennett's willing to amend the motion to clear or remove a typo in paragraphs A 650. Do you want to second that still, Mr. Smith?
Second.
Okay, so I got a amended motion and a second. Any more discussion? Not hearing any, I'm going to call for the vote to approve section A foundations and basic commitments with the changes proposed by Mr. Bennett, seconded by Mr. Smith. Can I call for the vote? Mr. Hidon,
Yes.
Mr. Vickers,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yeah.
Mr. Smith,
Yeah,
and I also vote yes. So section A is approved and adapted for Los Angeles School District, and we will post those as a modified amended policy on our webpage. Moving on to section B, school board governance and operations. We have talked about the changes that Mr. Vickers has, and then, of course, possible changes by a public member, Mr. Gardner. We need more discussion on this, gentleman, or is anybody ready to make a motion?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
one more point. One that was submitted by staff. In 2150, public participation at board meetings. What is that? Personal attacks,
So 2150 is under public participation in board meetings.
right, there's a note about public attacks in here. Yeah, okay. The last bullet on the page. Personal attacks by board member upon board members, staff, personnel, or other persons in attendance or absent by individuals who address the board are discouraged. And their recommendation is to replace that with prohibited or some similar
Stronger language.
prohibited, followed by the sentence, the board chair will stop a speaker prior to their allotted time if attacks are made.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Mr. Kennedy.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Elder. There's been a lot of litigation across the country about how much discretion the board has to prohibit subjects in public discussion or public comment. So I would recommend that the word discouraged be retained in your current policy. Because if you prohibit people from making a particular unpopular statement, you're going to get sued for violating the First Amendment. So there have been a number of cases across the country about this very issue. And so discouraging people from getting out of line in public comment is wise. Prohibiting people from making particular statements unless they are violent or threatening is not allowed under the First Amendment.
So, Mr. Kennedy, are you saying there's case law?
I
Supreme Court case?
It's federal court case law across the country. The U.S. Supreme Court hasn't decided it yet, but it is well established federal case law. So I don't have a case I can cite you off the top of my head. But if you would like a legal analysis of that, I'll provide it.
I would like to just also input that the problem that I see with that is it's still going to be at the discretion of the president. If I choose to stop somebody, it's going to be whether I find it offensive or and I think that's a problem. I don't think you have a different president, they might have a different opinion about what's prohibited or what should be discouraged. And I think that that's when you give us an option to choose how far they've gone, then we've started to draw a line. And I don't believe we can do that. And I think that it's discretionary by whoever's the president. So I mean, in my opinion, I understand why somebody might want us to prohibit it, but I don't believe it makes the most sense, and I think it would be problematic to the president or whoever's sitting here trying to make that decision.
Ms. Garcia?
Yes, sir.
So I have a question for Mr. Kennedy. So Mr. Kennedy, once we have established a public input section on our agenda and a public entity goes up there to start talking, is it permissible to stop them and say that is a subject that is best dealt in a different arena and it is not appropriate for this board meeting? That's my first question.
The answer is yes. You have the right to advise someone who is making public comment, and they come in and they raise an issue either personal to them or outside the business of the school, has nothing to do with anything on the agenda. You can stop them and say, your question or concern, have you raised your question or concern at a lower administrative level? Have you gone up the chain of command so that a principal or a central office administrator or the superintendent has attempted to resolve this issue before it's brought to the board? You have a perfect right to do that. So that's your first answer to your first question.
Yeah. Okay, or at least during public input section, any board member that feels that the conversation is a place where it doesn't belong in the open session of a board meeting can raise that concern.
You're saying if it's a matter that should be covered in a closed meeting?
You should still be able to raise that.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, it's no, correct. And that's usually raised by a point of order by an individual member. And then yeah.
Caution parties and that the person is opening themselves up to possible civil action if they cross the line. When we open it up for public discussion, we include that caution.
Yes, we do. I have the script in front of me.
Okay, well, I guess based on legal counsel, we believe discouraged in place.
Any other questions on section B amendments or changes other than the ones that Mr. Vickers has already added? We still have to consider Mr. Gardner's. And I guess point of order, Mr. Smith, are you thinking we adapt section B and then go through it and make the changes after that? Was that your thought of how you want to proceed?
I just want to make sure and these are so making them similar could be that we can be with the following amendment, and whoever wants to make that motion will insert the amendments that they feel section B needs, and we can either discuss the ones that we don't feel belong. I think it's just better that way, so we're not discussing them all, we're discussing only the ones that are of concern.
Understood. Anybody want to give me a motion for section B?
I'll try, Madam Chair. I move that we accept board policy section B titled School Board Governance and Operations with the following amendments. We remove the wording regarding the Public Education Commission in 0150. Um, We, in the second amendment would be under 0750 board member ethics, second page. Where it says work through the superintendent, make criticisms of school administration and or personnel only to the superintendent instead of the word him. And okay, so we're going to put in the correct regular meeting dates. That will already be done as a matter of like housekeeping, correct? And then to include David Gardner's recommendations that include specific wording changes that all appear to be sort of cleanup language, but nothing that seriously affects the meaning of the policies. I would recommend adoption of the policy with those amendments.
I got a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
I heard Mr. Smith, so Mr. Vickers made the motion. Mr. Smith seconded that motion. Discussion, gentlemen. Okay, so not hearing any discussion, I'm going to call for the vote. Mr. Hidon.
Yeah.
Mr. Vickers,
Yes,
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
and I too vote yes. Section B is now adopted with changes under the school board governance operations. Yes. Smith. And I'll vote yes. Thank you. So next, under item 8, we have the work plan for our next sections to be reviewed. I'll turn this over to Dr. Elder under agenda item 8.
And thank you, Madam President. You know, this first month that we were trying out a new process with reviewing sections A and B, having the feedback link up, we really had to work the bugs out. And I think that we did. And so we'll continue with the same pattern next month on section C under general school administration and F under facilities, where the board provides their comments and their review. We actually this evening are putting up those two sections as well as the feedback link on the website. So we have that up faster. And then we'll review those at next month's policy meeting in a similar fashion.
I'm sorry, Dr. Elder, did you say you gave us a
We'll follow the same pattern. There's not a handout.
there's not a handout.
There's not a handout, Madam President. We'll just follow the same pattern as we followed this month.
Okay, all right. So just to be clear, then we're moving on to section C, which is general school administration. And then we're going on to section F, which is facilities development. We are skipping, trying to get the less complicated policies worked on and passed, because we know we're going to spend a lot more time on some of the other sections. So that's the reason for the jump from C to F. Board members, you know your job. Read these policies, get your amendments or concerns to either Mr. Smith, to Dr. Elder, or to myself, so that we could be aware of them prior to the next board meeting, which is going to be coming up in the announcement of meetings, where we'll talk about those two sections.
Mr. Smith,
Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
sorry. And I just wanted to say that we did work on the timeline and we're finishing some of the sections of the timeline so we can get back on track. And I just want to state for everyone, board members, public staff, all of us, to adhere to that so we can get back on track and make this speedy. It is true that with these first two sections, it's taken a little bit of time, but we need to make sure that we're doing this right. We need to make sure that we're tailing it for Los Lunas, but once we get the process down, it's gonna move a lot faster. But if we could just get everybody to adhere to these timelines, because after the deadline, if we say that the board comment is due by whatever date, that's when it's due. If we say public input is due by this date, that's when it's due by. So we need to make sure that we do that as board members. We need to make sure that we're prepared. We read these sections and we can discuss like we did today. I thought today was pretty good when we did that. So if we can just keep this up and speed it up a little bit, I think it'll be fine.
And that timeline you spoke of, Mr. Smith, will be handed out to the board members once it's finalized?
Correct. That one, correct, Dr. Elder, the one that we discussed.
That's correct.
I think we're just tweaking it a little bit, but as soon as she's got it ready, I guess we'll all get a copy.
It'll be very similar to this month, so we'll, what we can do too is give a little bit more time and do, because the policy meeting is the first meeting of the month, which I believe in July will be July 11th. So we could ask for all feedback to be in by maybe the 5th. So that then Mr. Kennedy has adequate time to review the feedback prior to the meeting. The last one, we had different role groups at different times, and I don't think it was probably more complicated than it needed to be. I think we can streamline the process if that's the will of the board.
Do any board members see a problem with July 5th being the deadline to turn in or submit any changes? And then that would be the same deadline for public and staff. Okay. Okay. I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads, so I guess we're okay. That will take us to item number 9. Go, I'm sorry.
Clarification.
Yes.
So the final approval will be scheduled for the July 11th meeting. Is that correct? Okay,
Yes.
all right. That's all I have.
Going back to our agenda. We do have a discussion that we have to address a proposed catastrophic. Is that how you say it? Catastrophic leave policy. And staff is asking the board to hear that proposed policy and to adapt it tonight. Looking at our current policy adoption, which is in our new policies of B 2000 or 2600, I guess, under policy adoption, the first meeting of the proposal shall be to present for review, and the second meeting is presented for discussion and action. So the board is being asked at this time to suspend the current policy of B 2600 for a second read, so the board could consider acting on a catastrophic policy tonight. Can I get a motion for that suspending of policy 2600?
So move.
Second.
So Mr. Smith has moved to suspend policy B 2600 policy adoption. Mr. Bennett has seconded. Does anybody need clarification or discussion on that?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
do we have a copy of the proposed?
It should be in this file right here,
Oh, okay.
It's 5.44.
and 5.44, Mr. Bennett identified under definition A. Catastrophic.
Yep.
Madam Chair, does the board require me to assist in anything further?
Advice on where in the new policy manual the addition of catastrophic leave should be placed. The numbering system of our old policies is very different
Yeah.
from the numbering system of the NSBA policies. And so that would be my main request is where would this go?
Okay. We could probably exchange emails and talk about it because I would like to look at the existing sequence of leave policies and determine where it belongs. Okay,
So tonight we're addressing it as 5.44, but under our new policies, it probably has a different number. Okay.
Right. That's correct.
So I got a motion and a second. Did you have any other questions or can I excuse Mr. Kennedy? Mr. Smith, do you have any questions for Mr. Kennedy?
I do not.
Okay, your excuse, sir. Thank you. Safe travels.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. I hope you have a productive rest of your evening.
Any other discussion on the suspension of the policy?
No.
Not hearing anything, I'm going to call for the vote. Mr. Hedon?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Vickers?
Yes,
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So we have suspended that policy. Now let's go into discussion for possible action of the catastrophic leave policy.
Madam Chair, I'd like to invite Chief Personnel Officer Andrew Seiss to the podium to talk a little bit about our past practice related to this policy and our desire to honor our commitment to our employees.
Thank you. Board President Garcia, members of the board, Interim Superintendent Elder, thank you for this opportunity to speak to you this evening. Please consider adopting or carrying over the former board policy 5.44. It's actually named Employee Leave Donation Policy. I sometimes too get caught up in calling it the catastrophic leave policy, but it does include illness and injury as well. So employee leave donation policy. This consideration is in the same spirit and urgency of the diabetes and bilingual policies that have already previously been carried over. This would give our employees reasonable assurance that the district is still going to have this availability to them in case of a catastrophe or an unexpected illness.
So the policy that we have in front of us has some red lines.
Correct.
Want
So
to tell us what those are?
yes, I would. So we have personally redlined some items that as we get through working with some of our employees, will essentially take away the necessity for an employee to be required to have long-term disability insurance. So what we found out recently in a recent actual case is, although the board policy allows an employee to take care of an injured family member or sick family member, on the long-term disability side, we found out that that is not approved through long-term disability for an employee to take time off of work to care for an individual in their family using long-term disability. So it really didn't match up. So we are simply suggesting wherever we see long-term disability as a requirement or mentioned in the policy itself, just striking that and eliminating that as a requirement for employees to qualify for this.
So to follow your recommendation, that would be 7 be removed. Item 2C be removed.
That one would be altered. Correct. So we're not removing that one. We're just changing the language there to include leaving the 20-day max for donation. We're leaving that alone, but basically allowing an eligible employee to receive that donation without having the requirement for long-term disability. And then carrying over to E, we would eliminate that section altogether. Correct. Yes, ma'am.
that's all right. I can move that we adopt this policy with these 3 changes that staff has recommended.
So I've got a motion. Do I have a second? And there's still time to discuss it if we need to. Okay, so I got a motion by Mr. Vickers and I got a second by Mr. Bennett. Now, any discussion, gentlemen? Mr. Hedon, go ahead.
On page 5, under D, The first sentence says the Los Angeles Schools reserves a right. Who is the Los Angeles School? That's gonna make that decision.
That from reading and continuing to read, there is a committee under section G that makes that determination.
We have a committee that makes that determination, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And it's comprised of those folks that are mentioned in section G.
Mr. Smith, do you have any discussion there?
I do not. Thanks for that, presentation. This is a policy that I truly believe in, and in the spirit of being a school community, it allows us to help our coworkers out, which is a tremendous thing that we have going on in this district. The presentation was good. I agree with the red line. So that's the only comment that I have.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Yeah, that mine's a comment also, because the new policy that they're bringing to us, you would have to be certified to certified or classified to classified. With this one is it's any employee can donate if they've got the time available. It's a good one, like Mr. Smith says, it's everyone taking care of everyone. And I know the process, because when someone needs it, it goes out and it's probably filled within 20-30 minutes. So it's a great policy. I appreciate it.
Correct. Yes, sir. Just some side information you didn't ask, but I'm going to give it to you. Since the adoption of this policy in 2017, it was in August of 2017. We had our first person put in for it in January of 2018. Since that time, we've had 24 employees officially submit. We've had 6 that did not qualify for various reasons, but Mr. Bennett is exactly correct. It's helped out some employees in their dire times. So it's been a good policy.
Thank you, Mr. Sykes. Any other discussion, gentlemen? Okay, not hearing any. I'm going to call for the vote. Mr. Hidon,
Yes.
Mr. Vickers,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Amended, or I guess it would be amended and acted employee leave donation 5.44, which will be identified in our new policy numbers, and the catastrophic amendments have been added to our policies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll ask that we reinstate policy B 2600 for 2 reads. I need a motion.
So moved.
Yes. Okay, so I got Mr. Hidon. I heard him first. Mr. Smith, are you all right with the second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? I'll call for the vote. Mr. Hidon, Mr. Vickers.
Yeah.
Mr. Bennett, Mr. Smith. And I too vote yes, our policy is reinstated. So now we're on item 12, and I appreciate our guests that have stuck around through lights going out, power down, and what turned into a little bit longer agenda than we might have planned on. We need to discuss and approve the items as a result of our retreat, which is agenda item 12. Madam President,
Paul, and I am one of the consultants for the School Board Association Superintendent Search.
Thank you. If I could just, if I could just get you to the podium with the microphone, I appreciate it. Thank you.
And I have with me tonight, Bobby Gutierrez, who is also another esteemed member of this group. And so to start tonight's work, I want to just kind of go over the process that you discussed with Mr. Sullivan and Mrs. Gutierrez last week. This way the public knows what we're going to be doing, and we'll need some last minute information from you so that we can get moving. So with that being said, we're going to suggest a 7-step process to find a new superintendent. The timeline that we heard last week was that this process needs to conclude by August 1. So if that changes, please let me know. We try to advertise for about 30 days. This is a very compressed and accelerated search. And so, of course, we will modify it to your needs. And that's why we're saying August 1 is our end date. And we've built a couple of timelines for you to take a look at this evening so that we can get those nailed down. We will create a dedicated email address for all applicants to use. We will handle all of the background checks. And then we can help you if you choose to with contract negotiations as well. We will work closely with the HR department around fingerprint-based criminal history background checks, but that will come later on in the process. Next slide. So the 7-step process is simply this: our initial work session, which was sort of some last week, but tonight for sure. We want to talk about your staff and community engagement. That's a big step in this process. We want to make sure that we have good, strong promotional materials, and we finalize the job application. Do you want an essay as part of the application? Do you not? We will do the advertising. That's another thing we need to discuss tonight, is where you would like to advertise this position. Then we'll manage the applications. We'll ask people to email us at the dedicated email address. We will send them out the package of marketing materials as well as the application, and they will return it to that email address, not to the district, not to HR. I've already spoken to the HR person, so we're going to be in sync about that. Then, like I said, we'll do the initial screening for you. The last superintendent search we did, we wound up with 19 applications. The one before that I did, we had 4. So we really never know who's out there, who's looking, but we'll manage those applications. And then, of course, do the background checks, and we can handle all the notification of the candidates for you if you'd like. That's part of the service that we provide. We can also provide, I see a communication plan as your next item, so that kind of sparked a thought for me. We can also help with communication within the district, and an initial email to send out to all staff, letting them know what's going on. We can work with the local media, create some press releases for you. Of course, you would have final approval over all of that, but we can certainly do that. Then we will suggest an interview process for the new superintendent, using hopefully some staff and community that you talked about last week. And then, of course, your final act then would be to hire the new superintendent. And then we could talk about next steps. Another service we provide is after the search is over, when the new superintendent begins, sometimes we'll come in and facilitate a conversation between the new superintendent and the board to talk about evaluation and communication and all those kinds of things. Completely optional, completely up to you. So next slide. So the initial work, thank you, sir, is of course to listen to your priorities for the superintendent search. And I think that Mr. Sullivan and Mrs. Gutierrez did a good job of that last week. What are you looking for? It's so wonderful that you just approved policy section A, because in policy section A, you have some language about the superintendent, what you're looking for in a superintendent, their role, and we would like to lift that language and use that language in our advertisements, in our marketing materials, etc. What are the required and desired qualifications? If you have any additional you'd like to add, we can certainly take those into account, but they must have a license. So they have to have or be eligible for a New Mexico administrator license. We're going to work on the timeline draft in just a few minutes, and then just follow up with your ideas about staff, about the staff and community involvement. We need contact information for whoever within the district you want us to work with, and a board contact, a single point of contact for the board. Although we'll have all of you on speed dial. So if we need to reach the whole board, we can. But it works best if we have one person who can kind of be the interface between the consultants and the rest of the board. We'll review the superintendent application and then start the So next step. Community engagement, whatever you decide in terms of community engagement is what we'll execute. So if you want to use advisory committees, we'll do that. If you want to do a community-wide survey, we'll do that. Whatever it is that the board would like to do, we'll execute. Next slide. Step 3 is finalizing the application, and most of the superintendent searches that I've done, and I'll defer to Bobby on this one, we've included kind of a customized question for the district. So if, for example, attendance is a big problem post-COVID. And so we might put in a question about, student attendance has been a challenge. What are some of your ideas or suggestions for including all children in school every day? We can do a prompt like that, or whatever you want to do. We'll defer to you. And then all of that information will be sent to the potential candidates, and we'll see what comes back. We keep records of all of that, who we send it out to, who returns it, etc. We're also available throughout the process for questions. So if a candidate or prospective candidate has a question, it's easy for them to reach one of us, and we can make sure that they have the right information. Next slide. So one of the things that we're going to walk out of here tonight, hopefully, is your advice on how to advertise. We always suggest, of course, using our local resources. So the New Mexico School Boards Association website, the New Mexico Coalition of Educational Leaders website. If you're a part of REAP, we can work with your HR department to get it advertised in REAP as well. And then if you want to go here, you want to go to the American Association of School Administrators, for example, which is the national superintendent professional organization. We can place ads there. Bobby, what was the other place that you were suggesting?
Education Week.
Oh, yes. And you know what? I forgot. I think Tom is on the YouTube channel. Can he speak to us? He's on.
Yeah, probably not the way we have it set up.
Okay, no problem. So we'll do the application management, as I mentioned, and we'll organize and screen the applications for the board. When we receive, and we always receive applications that do not meet your minimum set of qualifications. And so we make sure to make sure we tell you this, you have access to everything, but we'll show you those applications, but they'll be separate from the ones that actually do meet your qualifications and are ready to go. Next slide. 5, of course, we're going to do some basic screening, like, are they eligible for a license? There was a school board who chose not to use us, got all the way to the end, offered a position to a gentleman for the superintendent position, and he couldn't qualify for a New Mexico license. So that is something we try to take care of up front with screening their paperwork. We handle, like I said, all the notifications and the background checks. And we are very clear with our candidates that we do not just check the references that they provide, but we use our vast networks and your vast networks to find out lots of healthy information about that. We also do the regular stuff like checking the website for sex offenders, checking the website for and in courts, just to get a better idea of who that person is and what they've done. Next slide. The interview process, if you choose, and it sounds to me like you're going to be using advisory committees, which is wonderful. The only mandated requirement for the advisory committee is that they attend our training. They have to be trained ahead of time before they interview people, because a lot of people don't do this every day, and we don't want to get into legal problems later on because somebody asked an inappropriate question during that. It's a 20-minute training, doesn't take very long, but it's important that everybody be on the same page for that interview process. And then we're here to facilitate that. Probably Mr. Sullivan or Mrs. Gutierrez will sit in with you on the interviews so that you have someone right there who's listening to the candidates as well. And then at the end of the day or the end of the session or whatever, however the timeline works, when you meet as a board, we would ask to be invited into that executive session, and we can help work that out, help facilitate that. And then again, if you desire, we can handle some press releases for you and let the community know the names of the finalists. Next slide. So then again, as I mentioned, we can do some after search work too, if you would like us to, but that is entirely optional. Next step. So, oh, look at this, a fixed price of XXX. Oops. Did not edit that slide very well, did I, ladies and gentlemen? I apologize for that. So we prefer to work on a fixed price contract. This way we're not nickel and diming you for every trip to Los Lunas, for every time we do anything. So we like to work with a fixed price, and it includes all the services that we just outlined. If you choose to advertise in Ed Week or in AASA, that's a pass-through expense. So I have a corporate credit card, we'll put it on the credit card, we'll get the ad placed right away, it's much faster, and then I'll seek reimbursement with the first invoice to the district. So whatever it is, there's no upcharge to that, it's a flow-through expense. And then we're happy to come to Los Lunas as often as we're needed and by mutual agreement. So we've had some boards that want us there like every day. And we try to be realistic about this, that you probably don't need us every day, but we're available by phone and by email all the time. So the fixed price that we're going to be quoting you tonight is $14,500 plus gross receipts tax, plus any additional fees for the advertising. Next slide.
So that was 14,500 plus gross receipt.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
If you're interested in additional services, the price list is included in the proposal that I have to leave for you tonight. And then we will also ask that the district handle most of the photocopying. For example, when we get down to the interviews, we like to provide the advisory committee members with copies of resumes and feedback forms and all of those things. And it's much less expensive if we have a person within the district that we can work with to reserve space, to do the copying, to provide, you know, the kind of the nuts and bolts that we need to make that day successful. Next slide. And so we've got a draft timeline that I'm going to turn the mic over to Bobby to look at with you so that, again, we meet your needs. And is that still true that you want to have a new superintendent in place by August 1? That's my first question. And if the answer is yes, then there's two options for you to look at in terms of a timeline.
Okay, so gentlemen, the first question was, are we still on the timeline of having this done by August 1?
Ms. Garcia.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, that was the timeline that I was most acceptable to. I think that gives us the opportunity to get somebody in here very, very soon, joking schools and stuff. And we discussed last week, that seemed to work out best.
Any have a problem with that or want to change, recommend a change?
President Garcia, if I could just make a couple of statements about this. So the first is kind of a set timeline based on our discussion last week and trying to make this happen within about the 30 days. But this evening you selected, I think you already have a work session planned for July 11th for your other policy work. So we might need to take a look at that date. The second option gives you some choices with dates. So you could think of it like going to dinner at a Chinese restaurant and having this off soups and that off wontons and, you know, put it together in that way. So these are some dates that we suggested. There is a Saturday date of the July 15th. We don't know if you would be interested in doing screening of the finalists on that days. That can be a lengthy process or a short process, depending on the number of applicants. And then board interview dates aren't quite so fixed. could do that in the following week and still probably make your announcement the week of January 31st, because once you decide on a candidate and make the offer, they may want some time to think about it. May want to do some negotiation or have questions before signing a contract. So those are just things to keep in mind that
And you
it
said
could
January,
delay.
I just want to confirm, it's July.
Oh, I'm sorry,
That's just to confirm.
July, excuse me.
Go ahead.
So what do you envision in this, you have the advisory committees. And are they going to see the candidates in person, or are they going to see resumes online, like electronically transmitted to them? And how is that going to work with them? And do they then see the final list in person and have a chance to interview them in person?
I'll let Dr. Paul speak to that. Just from personal experience, I've seen advisory committees actually interview the applicants with the fixed set of questions that they have for that particular group. If it's parents, community, or staff, usually have different questions, much more focused on instruction and management of the district, policies, supporting principals, those types of things. But at the end of the day, I believe that's your option, but I'll let Dr. Paul describe maybe some more recent interviews and what's been done.
So, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Elder, what we typically do is ask the advisory committees to interview the candidates in person on the same day that you're interviewing. So if you think of a building this size, you may be in this room, the one advisory committee may be in a conference room, another committee else's conference room. And so it becomes kind of a round robin candidates. One candidate will start with you, one with one committee and one with another, and then they'll rotate. We also sometimes use a writing prompt the day of interviews. And so we'll need a space set aside for people to hook up to the internet and do their written component, completely optional. You can do it either way. And then we ask that the district provides lunch that day, and everybody has lunch together. So it gives another opportunity just to kind of see how candidates interact with the committees and with the board. There's not a lot of time to do that usually, but it's helpful to kind of see people in a more informal situation as well. And then at the end of the day, everyone is excused and you meet as a board to make the final decision. Now, that being said, the advisory committees are given a very specific feedback form. We have found that unless you use something pretty structured, you're going to get feedback about everything and everybody. So we have developed a feedback form that we ask every member of the advisory committee to fill out for each candidate. And then one of us will take those papers and sit down with the computer and compile the comments and for your advisory committees. We're very clear with the advisory committee that statutorily, you are the ones that make the decision, not the advisory. But their role is to provide you with good input. And so we have a very structured process to do that, so that at the end of the day or the next day, whenever you're considering making the decision, then you have that information available for you as well. And then what you do with that in terms of weighting it or giving it lots of credence or not so much credence, entirely up to the board. The board can choose that. And we're very clear with the advisory committee members that they are not selecting a new superintendent. The board is. And their role again is to give input. So we try to structure it. Yes, they have, we usually prepare packets for all the advisory committee members as well as the board. And in that packet, we'll have every finalist's resumes and cover letters in there so that everyone can read that live, take notes on it, whatever. They'll have the questions for each candidate that they'll be asking. And again, we'll leave room so people can take notes. And then we'll have the feedback form. At the end of the interviews, we will collect everything. We collect the input forms and compile those. We collect all the notes and all of that other stuff, and we put it in a folder and leave it in the safe for 7 years. So we don't want things to get way out into the community. We also stress the confidentiality when we're training people, but there has been, I mean, the boards, we could give you a dozen references, the boards that have used advisory committees that have interviewed the the finalists. The board loved that because it gave them some very valuable feedback to look at from the staff and the community. It's been very interesting over the years. I hate to sound cliche, but cream rises, and it tends to be the same people are coming to the top in all the committees, including the board.
So to follow up, do you envision the candidates, assuming, let's, say that there's some coming from hundreds of miles away, they fly in,
Happens all the time.
that all the in-person events with candidates will happen on only one day? Or do you envision like a Friday night, more social thing, and then the nuts and bolts on Saturday?
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Elder, again, that's entirely up to you. Some districts have chosen to do like a Friday night open house where they have all the finalists there, like in a multi-purpose room or gym, and the public can circulate and talk with the candidates. They maybe can statement. Some districts say, yeah, no, no, thank you. We have our advisory committee. That's our community involvement. Other districts do a district-wide survey. We use a great survey tool that we can send out with the district's help, to not only the staff, but to the community as well, and gather a lot of information in a very short amount of time. So the bottom line is, it depends. It depends on what you want. If you want a Friday night and Saturday, we'll make it happen. Candidates are expecting to pay for this themselves. If I apply for a job in Missouri, I know that it's my responsibility to get to Missouri for the interview. So I don't think the board has any financial obligation to bring anybody in for the interview. Now, once you select the successful candidate, there may be some negotiations about relocation costs or something like that may happen. But in terms of the applicant pool or the finalists, the board has no obligation to pay for that. So we do try to keep it to one day for that reason, so people can travel in the night before if they want, or even that morning if they want, and join us for the day, and then they're free. So I just ask that they stay within telephone contact with us, so that as you meet, whenever you meet, if you meet at the end of that day, or you meet the next day, or 2 days later, or whenever, you have you've got the information that you need to make a good decision and go from there. But I want to be able to call them during executive session to say, hey, the board would like to offer you the position, blah, blah, blah. And because if they've changed their mind, I don't want the board to come out into open session and offer the position to an individual and then the individual not accept the position. Very awkward. Have that happen once, very awkward, not a fun thing to do. So we try to avoid that.
Okay, that's all I have.
Any other questions?
Ms. Garcia.
Go ahead.
So, I have a couple of comments. So one, when we're talking about the advisory committee, and I think that we had agreed that we wanted a staff one and a community one as well. From what I understand that we discussed, there would be no vetting by these advisory committees. They will be there to interview the finalists. That's correct. Is it
Yes, sir.
not?
That's correct.
Yes, she said.
Okay, so that would be, they would be there to only interview the finalists, and then they would be, that their information would be available to them. That was one of the questions I had. The other one was, you were talking about July 15th, and I know that 2 board members are not here. I'm actually out of the country from the 5th till the 16th. So a Saturday before or the 22nd would probably work, but if we could do it before, that would be fine. I don't know how much time we're looking at, since I can't see a graph. But that I'm aware of, I don't know of a candidate that we haven't hired like in one day, and you're correct. We do all the interviews on one day. But I don't know of a candidate that actually said, can I think about it and I'll give you a call in 2 weeks. I mean,
No.
does that happen a lot?
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Elder. I've had one candidate say, I need some time to think about it. When I call the finalists, and I do that in person, or Bobby or Tom, when I say me, it's the royal me, it's us. When we call the candidate, we tell them the board is going to be prepared to make a decision this day, whatever day that is. So please be ready to make a decision that day too. So if you need more information about the community, if you need more information about the district, if you need more information about New Mexico, now's the time to ask. And now's the time to gather that information. Because again, we're going to be clear that we have an August 1 start date. So we don't have a lot of time to advertise this for 6 months and blah, blah, blah. So we're on an accelerated timeline. We're going to ask that people be ready to make a decision. Of course, I would never stop a candidate from calling a spouse or significant other or whomever they need to consult with, but they're not going to get 2 weeks to make a decision. They're going to get 2 hours to make a decision because you have to get going. The board has to meet in open session then and make the hire. And then that person has to be able to begin the job quickly, if not on August 1st, pretty soon thereafter. So we're on a pretty tight.
Okay, and my other comment was, I do really believe in that Friday night meet and greet, for lack of a better description of what that looks like. But I think that just gives an opportunity to show transparency on our part and allow the public and businesses and whoever to come in and meet the candidate. So I do agree with that Friday thing. I would like to see it last 2 days interviews on one day, like we've always done it here. I think that's probably the only 3 comments I have as of right now. But I just wanted to make sure that we were aware that 2 board members, I think, I know my dates are 6 to 15. I'm not sure what the other board members' dates are, but I'm out of the country, so there's no way out that I could be here on those days. So just in planning consideration.
So, yeah, so
Thank you.
looking at either option 1 or option 2, where we are running into an issue is going to be that Board of Education work session screen to finalists. Okay, so either we move that up or we move it back. And I believe Mr. Hedon's dates are very similar to Mr. Smith's. Mr. Hedon, what were your dates?
I think it's the 4th through the 15th.
So,
Well, Madam Chair, I have been tapped to go to the leadership retreat in Cloudcroft,
what date is
13th,
that?
14th, 15th.
13th.
So we'll go for the
Right.
15th.
Okay, so it looks like whatever we decide on, the work session screen to finalists has to be after the 15th. And the 15th is on a Saturday, so I'm not available the 16th through the 18th. So
Later that week.
Are there any other pockets of time that the board members can't attend? Because we can take this home and redo a timeline and shoot it back to you tomorrow. I think, because I tried to get that heard today, I forgot about Cloudcroft, but I think that's it. Okay.
So it's gonna have to be before the 4th or after the 18th.
So I think if you want the ad to run for about 3
It has to be
weeks.
after the 18th.
Just-
Well, and President Garcia, if I may, just with looking at the date that it closes, we could either close it on July 6th or 7th, but to allow about 3 weeks to advertise, we could shorten the window, but by a week. But I think you wouldn't do your search justice if you shorten it by more than 10 days or 2 weeks. So that we could rework that and go for a shorter period for advertising. I think the concern is getting you a viable candidate by the week of the 31st or by August 1st, which was an important date because school's starting, but it might run into a week after that, given your commitments already and not being in district, because it's certainly an important decision. And I know all 5 of you want to be here.
So I think if you could give us an option that would make that screening to finalists after the 18th, your board interview date would probably work just fine. And the announcement would work just fine. It's just that screen to finalists that we'd have to push that.
In the screen to finalists, we can also do, we have a Zoom account. So we can also do that virtually because you'll be going into executive session. You would come wherever you are, you call yourselves into order using the YouTube channel. And if you have a back channel that we can use for executive sessions, I'm happy to use your technology, but we also have the capacity. Then you could start your public meeting, call yourselves to order, do all that work, and then go into executive session to consider the finalists. We typically set up a Dropbox or a Google Doc site for you to get all the applications. So you have access to that. If you would like us to ask the district to print those for you, we can do that as well. But a lot of times board members want it electronically so they can read it at their convenience. They can read for a while, go get a cup of coffee, come back and read some more. So really it's up to you on how you want to do that, but we can do that virtually. So that might avoid everybody having to come back in together because all we're going to do is simply go into executive session and do our work. So that can be done online. And also it kind of depends on the board members too. If you guys do your homework and do the reading and come to a conclusion, then or come up with your top 4 or 5 or 2 or 3 or your top 6 or whatever. We prefer it to be a smaller. To do 6 interviews is almost impossible. So we like to have finalist interviews around the 2 to 3 to 4 range. And we know we're confident that we can do 2, 3, and 4 candidates in a day. And still leave you as a board time to meet afterwards in executive session to make your decision if you want to do it on the same day. So why don't we, what I wrote down was we have to either do things before July 4 or after July 18. Is that correct? And that would accommodate everyone's schedule.
Yes.
So we'll black out those dates. We'll send you an updated timeline then tomorrow.
Right.
So that we don't waste everybody's time doing the timeline.
Okay.
Here, we can do that offline and get that to you.
Thank you.
So then any other questions?
Can we authorize the board president to finalize the timeline with you all
Certainly can.
rather than have, wouldn't want to have another meeting, just give you the authority
Make it happen.
to do it after polling us or something.
Yeah, I would say maybe have the timeline go out to all board members and that same day, give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Otherwise, we're going with it.
Great.
Okay.
And then as we looked at board policy A that you just adopted tonight, like I said, there's a lot of language in there, but there's some language in there around the super. So if you're okay with that, we'll lift that and use that in our advertisement. Next slide, please. We can use that in our advertisement if you're comfortable with that. If not, then we have some other ideas and some other suggestions for you. But it's been our experience that the closer you stay to your own policy, the better it is, because you just adopted it.
And just to be clear on that one, we're talking about the students, the teachers, the principals, local board and superintendent.
Yes.
That language under superintendent.
Yes, and the next one, the next section there, 2 words.
The management principle.
Managing principles, yes.
And we'll wordsmith that a little bit so it fits into an advertisement so that it doesn't sound awkward, so that it sounds smooth and clean. We can do that, but we'll use essentially those ideas as you tell us. And so did I hear that Mrs. Garcia is going to be our contact for the board?
Yes.
Right. And then the district contact, who would you like us to work with within the district?
Can I get you that name tomorrow?
Absolutely. Thank you.
I'll
That
get
would
you
be
that
great.
name and contact tomorrow.
That would be great. Advisory committee members, we have some already.
So we have sent lists. I think I have just one board member that I have to send it to you today. But I've collected everybody's and send the ones that I have. So you should have your community list, 3 people each, and your staff and leadership members, 3 each. So you should already have that, or we'll have that by tomorrow morning.
And President Garcia, I did receive those lists today. I had a couple of meetings in Santa Fe before I left to come down here, but I did see them and I'll go back to the hotel this evening and get that sorted out.
Okay. So those should.
Thank you very much. And my next question then is, have you contacted those people? Have the board members reached out to those people?
So our discussion that we had in retreat was that it was up to us individually to confirm that they were a yes.
Okay.
Before we sent them to you.
Excellent.
So I hope that's true, guys. True, yes, okay. So then, the only other thing I heard you say was they're required to do this training. If they don't do the training, they come off the list.
Correct.
Got it.
And we try to accommodate everybody's schedule. We usually do it virtually. We use the Zoom account. We do one in the afternoon. We do one in the evening. In the past couple of times, that's worked out really well. Sometimes we need a second evening to do it, or if one person is like, I just can't make it, but I really want to do this, we accommodate them. So we'll work with your people to get them trained to the best of our ability. But if they don't show up, then they'll get an email before the interview saying, thank you so much for your interest. However, you didn't complete the mandatory training. You've been excused from the process. So people don't like to get that email, but we can't risk the legal problems if people don't understand how to do interviews in the public sector. Okay, so the last thing that we need to talk about is where you want to advertise. I'm assuming that we'll go with NMCEL and New Mexico School Boards Association and REAP. So beyond that, is there any place else you want to advertise in EdWeek or in AASA?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
I'd like to see it advertised in both those publications. That's just my input.
So everything she named plus the last 2 is what you're saying,
Right.
Mr. Vickers?
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like all of them. Is that the will of all the board? Any reason not to consider that by any other board member?
Just to give you a rough idea of cost, the last AASA ad that I placed was about $750 for 30 days. And then, but Bobby's a member, and so we might get that down a little bit. EdWeek, I haven't looked at in probably 18 months, so I can't even cite a cost for that. But the nice part about those national organizations is that they're sending this out nationwide. They're sending email blasts, they're posting it on their own websites, and their websites are searchable. So if you're looking for a superintendent position in the Southwest, you can kind of zoom in on those with those publications.
And to understand you, that's additional to the fixed price you're giving us.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I have 2 other documents with me tonight that I can leave you, or I can email you tomorrow if you'd like. I have an actual proposal where we're putting everything that I've said tonight in writing to you so that you're not relying on, oh, did I remember that right? I have it in writing for you. And then I also have a contract, sample contract. It's not really a sample contract. It's a contract that aligns with what we just talked about, aligns with the proposal that we're going to give you.
But for us to stay on timeline, I need to approve that tonight. You need approvals tonight.
That would be
Yes.
ideal. So
And I
that we can get
I
this
would
on
hope
the street
it's
by
prepared
Friday.
to do that. Okay.
Now, one other point of clarification, I understand that you believe that maybe some staff is going to help us with the marketing piece. Is that true? Did I get that right? Or
You did get that right. We do have our social media person who we think, although I have not reached out to or had a conversation with, might be able to help with some of the social media stuff and maybe some of the brochures that I think we talked about. I may have dropped the ball on that, so I forgot I have to reach out there. So I have not done that, but I can, and I'm pretty sure we can help you with that.
That would be wonderful. If you could just email us with that information.
You just need her name and phone and, okay, and
An email address.
okay, so, and I'll just make sure that she can, I don't see why she couldn't, but
And it's
I haven't asked.
It's a fast turnaround because we're
Okay.
hoping to be we're hoping to go live on Friday.
Right, okay, I'll
With
get
the
you that tomorrow. Okay.
And of course, we'll ask that you post it on your website, you put it in, on your social media pages and et cetera. So if there's any place in the city or the village that you want us to advertise, please let us know. We're happy to drop that off.
And that would go into our local paper, we would let you know that as well.
Yes.
Yes,
This is for you, Bobby. We know the path forward we're going, we're gonna be advertising. During our retreat, I was led to believe we all agreed on our requirements and desirables or stuff like that. Is that the language that's gonna go out in the advertisement?
President Harron, President Garcia, and Board Member Harron. I had put together the list of desired characteristics and qualities. Just kind of pick and choose what you want. But at the end of the day, because this is in your policy specific to superintendent, Linda and I discussed earlier, that's probably what you need to stick with. There's not any reason why some of those things that were very important to you, like high visibility in the district and in the community, there's not any reason why interview questions could not be developed around that. And as the board, you set those as your expectations for your new superintendent. So we can discuss that certainly, or just say additionally, the board would like to see the following characteristics and qualities. It would just be a link with a link from the advertisement probably to, the application process online so that they could see everything that you would like to see. But that truly is up to the board members, what you would like to do with that. But because you've got a policy that states your belief statements and then the managing principles, it's probably important that you use that as part of the process as well.
So, you're saying what we.
Tell me what you do last.
No. It was just a discuss. Yeah, it was a discussion. So one of those things was just around, of course, being appropriately licensed. And then the other, yes. And then the other was prior teaching experience, prior principalship, preferable but not required central office experience is what you discussed in terms of, in addition to being licensed, having that experience as a principal, as a teacher, as a principal, and preferably central office, but not required.
So leaving that meeting.
I had that to present to you so that I believe could still be included.
I still. So if you would rather do some of these other pieces, we're happy to. I'm going to need it here on the experience. But we'll refer the candidates then to your board policy because it's in policy now.
So let me ask this question again. With what we agreed to last week, how does it conflict with our policy?
Policy, not the same language. So
Okay.
I think both be the strongest position.
So we didn't vote last week on anything. We just worked it out. So tonight we should be ratifying something like that then.
And I have that. I can share with you what I had put together based on what we heard in your discussion at the retreat around high visibility, relationship building, all of those things. I'd be happy to share that document with you if that's what you want to include in all of this as well, because you're right, it is what we discussed. and you could, I think you approved section A, but for the superintendent piece, I believe, and I'm not Mr. Kennedy, but I believe you could develop a policy around that, or you could amend board policy 00A000 to add those, like you're amending some of your other adopting and then bringing them back for amendment.
Well, so we don't, I've seen what is in our policy, and I think, like was noted, it's a different language, but it's basically the same characteristic and points. I guess I wouldn't be opposed to including that and adding these couple of things that have been noted. But I think, as has been stated, we need to be very careful about staying in our policy of what we want our superintendent to do. And I don't know that we want to get into changing the language of the policy right now, or even in the future, if we just adopted it. But just my thoughts.
And Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Elder, I would also push you to have much experience you would like in the principalship and how much experience you would like teaching. I know it doesn't sound like a lot now, but down the road and we get applications in, if they only have 1 year's experience as a principal, is that okay? Or do they need 3 years? Is teaching for 2 years or 3 years okay? Or do you want a little bit more classroom experience? So I'm gonna be the and simply ask you for some years of experience, so that again, we're transparent, we're perfectly clear about what we're advertising for.
Madam Chair.
I'm fine with this. Sorry.
No. So I'd like to comment on requirements whenever that's appropriate.
Go ahead, comment.
So it was mentioned, well, we mentioned one that is not listed here, that in the past we have asked that required that the superintendent live in the district. And at the retreat, there seemed to be some consensus around that would be preferred, but not necessarily required. Also, the issue of prior principal experience, I think that is one that we need to allow flexibility on, because you can have somebody who has a lot of teaching experience, a lot of central office experience, and technically not a principal at a school site, but has that kind of experience anyway in supervising teachers, etc., but more of a maybe a district-wide type of thing. So I would like to make the principal experience preferred, but not necessarily required.
Madam President, members of the board, if I could react to that, one of the ways that we've worked with boards around that same issue is to say 3 to 5 years experience as a principal or in other senior leadership roles in the district, in your district. So we could do a 3 to 5 year window, if you will. They must have 3 to 5 years experience with either being a building principal or holding another senior leadership position in the district. So this way it still gives you a range of years. You've got the 3 to 5 years in there. So if somebody is newer and they only have 3 years, it still meets your qualifications. Or if they have 2 years as a principal and 3 years in central office, they clearly meet your qualifications. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I just think we need to be flexible. People have very experience. And I don't want to throw somebody out just because they don't quite fit our template exactly. And I think we need to allow ourselves some flexibility there. I also, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Elder, I also had the opportunity to speak with your attorney on the way here this evening. And she and I discussed the issue of living in the district. And here was what we came up with.
Legally, you are not required to pay relocation costs or anything else. Legally, you are not required to do that. However, as a practical matter, you may want to consider doing that. If having somebody live in the district is really important to you, what she and I talked about was putting money to that. And so if you want to offer some relocation money, if it's that important to you to have the person live in the district, then I think you need to put that on the table. We can say strong preference for candidates that are willing to live in the Los Lunas School District. And I would be really careful with this, that I wouldn't say the village of Los Lunas, I would say the Los Lunas School District. Because that's who you are. So we can handle it that way. We may not even have to deal with it. When we look at applications, they may all be in-state applications, so it might not be that big an issue. But again, it's, you know, I've been a superintendent in New Mexico and my board thought they wanted me to live in the district. But my husband owned a business in the neighboring town and I could be in the district, I could be at central office faster than people that lived, you know, way out, but still lived in the district. So they were okay with that. I always showed up. I was always there. I was 15 minutes away. So
Yes, sir.
So we came up with a list, although we didn't ratify it, we had to agree. We came up with a list of minimum qualifications that we, in theory, agreed on because we didn't have an argument. And then we had some discussion with the people that are running the superintendent search, and they make valid points about what experience is necessary to run a school district. And we talked about evaluation. And I use myself as an example. If I've never been a dentist, how am I going to go evaluate dentists and tell them how to do their job? So we discussed minimum requirements that we wanted as a board at that retreat. So, and again, we didn't vote, but I think it's crucial that for our superintendent candidate to have principal experience. Now, how much is debatable? To see, you know, 3 years as a minimum to be a principal to be a superintendent. But I think it's a definite something that we need to include in the minimum requirement. Because when we consider what's at stake here, going back to the $750 to advertise in a certain publication, again, that's not a lot of money considering what's at stake. So we have a job to do, and we're going to pick the best person to lead the school district. We need to stick with what we had talked about last week.
So, Madam President, members of the board, did you discuss a specific amount of experience that you're looking for? Because again, if you just say high school experience, they could make it in the role provided.
No, the requirements are as listed, but we didn't give specifics. So I'm hearing that we need to do that. Okay. So I'm hearing 3 to 5. I'm hearing preferred. What's the other board members think?
I just want to know when things change in 1 week. I took 2 days out of my life to go do something, work together as a board. We worked together, it was positive, and now we're changing?
Well,
I mean,
well, I will just say that I wasn't in agreement at that point. And since then, we had the school law conference and I was able to talk to a lot of attorneys and board members from other districts. So I got new information and
what, can you share that information with us?
I'm just saying, in my opinion.
No, I want the information that was given back to you, not your opinion.
The requirement for principal experience is too rigid, and it doesn't allow enough flexibility. I do not want to eliminate candidates unnecessarily. I want us to be able to look at all of them. So that is my input, so that I can make that as a motion that I would ask that that be changed to a preferred, and you could say 3 to 5 years, that's fine. Exactly like your wording was 3 to 5 years, principal, central office, some kind of administrative, high-level administrative experience. So. Mr. Smith can't hear you if you're not at the mic, so.
I just had my knee replaced, so I'm up and down, up and down. I apologize. So I think that moving it out of a required qualification into a preferred qualification is maybe not the best practice. Because what if they don't have any leadership experience? They could come back and say, well, that was a preferred, not a required. And so you may be looking at candidates that have no leadership experience. And if that's what you want in a superintendent, I'm the consultant, you're the board. But again, I want to echo what my colleague said last week, that there's some value to having that experience in your pocket and in your life to come into the superintendency. It's not an easy job. And they're going to be responsible for everything, for the instructional program, as well as this beautiful new school that's going in, as well as the finances for the district. So to have some insight into how a classroom works and insight into what your principals are facing, I think is critical. Because again, I'm trying to like lay it out or work it out 6 more steps and say, well, okay, so now we're at, the end of July, we're looking at applications. And we have 14 applications with people with no leadership experience. And is that what if that's what you want, I'm happy to do it. If that's what you don't want, then let's wordsmith it so that we get what we want at the end of the day.
So I guess I stand corrected. Your wording was require 3 to 5 years of
Principalship experience or central office experience.
or. Right.
Yes, thank you,
Okay, so that's what I would.
So that would take your third and fourth bullet and combine them, but adding 3 to 5 years on it.
Yes. It has to be quantifiable. Otherwise, why put it in there?
There was reason, Madam President,
Go ahead.
we spoke, we talked about this, a lengthy discussion with this, and we went back and forth with this. And you weren't there, but she was, and the reasons why we did what we did.
Right.
And the reasons why we separated, ma'am, is the administrative from the principal. Those reasons why we did that in that meeting.
As long as it's there, whatever works best for you guys, I'm happy to put in writing.
Mr. Bennett, where are you on this?
Well, I like what you guys are saying, to 3 to 5 years, a combination.
But we never said that.
Well,
It's
we're
changing
debating
from
it now. We can vote on it now.
Well, that's what he said. I mean, it's like we're saying, we never said that.
We, if I may, President Garcia, we did discuss at length, Board Member Hurón is right. Just what are the important things about becoming a superintendent? And he did specifically ask me the question. I think having been a superintendent in 2 districts, it's important to have that principalship. And that's just my personal belief based on what I know and what we discussed. Your principals make you or break you as a superintendent, and it's hard to gain their trust and respect and immediately if you have not been in that principalship. Central office experience gives you the bigger understanding of a school district. But and this is just my personal opinion, but it's up to you. It's not a legal opinion. Just my professional opinion was, I think it's important because in our schools is where it happens. It's what we're all about. It's where the rubber meets the road. And it's important that your district leader, in my opinion, have that experience going into central office and then going into the principalship. And that's not to say there aren't great, the superintendency. And it's not, there are great leaders in central office, but it's really hard to understand in many ways how our schools operate and function. So that was my opinion.
President, thank you, Bobby, for staying, because you were able to articulate to us last week. And we understood that. That's why we walked out of there. I was led to believe we're under an agreement. That's what was gonna happen. And tonight I heard different things. But that's what we agreed to. That's what we spent our time with that day.
But again, Board Member Haron and President Garcia, board members, it's your decision collectively overall. That was just my experience and my prep, because you asked me last week. So yes, I did share that.
When you look at your timeline, you're asking this person to hit the ground running, August 1, plus or minus. So if they don't have any credibility with the current staff, because they haven't had a leadership position in a school and or a district, that's going to be a very tough start. If they come with that kind of experience, they come with some level of credibility. And so I would encourage you to keep it in the required portion of the ad.
Madam President, and the reason why we discussed this, and my question, I know I wasn't the one who asked her this, but somebody else asked, is it important to have that as a requirement? And the words that I heard come back and that I've already made up my mind with is, you need a superintendent to be able to evaluate a principal, because that principal, a superintendent's had to have been a principal before to be able to evaluate that position in a fair and equitable manner. That's what was discussed.
Okay, so gentlemen, point of order, I had a motion raised by Mr. Vickers that the requirement change from what was directed of them to write down for requirements for tonight. So we do have a change here. Mr. Vickers had made that motion, and do you want to reiterate that motion and see if you get a second, Mr. Vickers?
That prior principal and or central office experience of 3 to 5 years be required.
Do I get a second?
I'll second.
So I got a second by Mr. Bennett. We've had discussion.
What it is they're saying?
You want him to restate it? Go ahead, sir.
Under requirements, the requirement would be prior 3 to 5 years of experience, principal experience and or central office experience. 3 to 5 years.
I got the motion and the second. Any other discussion? Okay, I'm going to call for the vote. Mr. Hidon,
No.
Mr. Vickers,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
No.
and I'm going to go no, guys. We talked about this at length, and I did take the recommendation of the staff, and I do appreciate that the experience as a principal matters, and motion fails. So I need a motion for the requirements as posted.
Madam President, I move that we accept these requirements, these 4 bullets.
Mr. Hidon, I need years of experience on teaching and principal in your motion.
So possess or be eligible to qualify for administrative license in the state of New Mexico, prior teaching experience, and prior principal experience. I'm going with 3 years.
On both?
Yes.
I got a motion by Mr. Hidon. Right. And the central office is preferred but not required. That stays there.
I put those 3 bullets as required. I can add that central office experience preferred, but not required.
So it would be the 4 requirements.
Yes.
In that order.
Yes.
Do I get a second?
We didn't address the issue of living in the district.
I didn't make that part of my motion.
Okay.
Yes. So.
That's central office.
No,
It's just preferred but not required. Sorry.
right. Teaching 3 years, principal 3 years, central office preferred but not required.
Sorry.
Okay. I got a motion. Yes.
Living in the district?
It is not part of the motion as it stands.
Board members. On that, if given the location of Los Lunas, if somebody was to live in Milan or live in Albuquerque, somewhere remotely close to there, we can probably discuss whether that should be required to live within the village of Los Lunas, Bosque Farms, Peralta, Isleta area. But I think when we get to that point, it's going to have to be within reason, and I'm not sure how you can wordsmith that to say that the residents have to be within a geographical area as agreed upon by the board or something like that. Maybe they've dealt with this before, that it's written that way, but I would be okay with allowing somebody to not live within the town limits as long as they are accessible and visible in our district and can get to work, in a reasonable amount of time.
So currently it's not part of the motion. And I still need a second.
Okay.
So I got a motion and a second for the requirements as discussed in retreat, adding 3 years to each teaching and principal. Any more discussion?
Madam President,
Yes.
I don't want to include that in the motion, living in the district. I think that's something that we can address when we choose our superintendent and we can negotiate something. But that's something, in my mind, it's something way down the road.
That is a negotiable thing later if we don't state it. Okay.
Everything's on the table, salary, everything.
That's correct.
Make that. Okay, so I have a motion on the requirements. I got a second. I'm gonna call for the vote. Mr. Hidon,
Yes.
Mr. Vickers,
No.
Mr. Bennett,
No.
Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith. I think we lost him. He's not on the speaker.
He just texted, he's out. I'm gonna have to dial him in again.
Dial him back in. He's gonna use the. So we called for the vote. You're up on the requirements that was done on the motion and seconded by you. Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Smith. Yes, it's your vote. Mr. Hidon voted yes. Mr. Vickers voted no. Mr. Bennett voted no, and it's your vote. And I'm gonna vote yes. Motion passes. Now, gentlemen, we have to come up with the salary range.
Correct, President Garcia.
I need a motion to salary range.
Ms. Garcia, so I looked at salaries around our area and compared them with districts around the state of New Mexico, and it's kind of mixing apples and oranges. You know, there's some bigger districts, but in some different types of areas in the state of New Mexico, so it's kind of hard. But I would say based on experience, somewhere between 160 and 180, I would feel comfortable with, 180 being for a very qualified individual, but that would just be my recommendation.
Any other discussion on what a salary would look like?
What was the final salary that we paid Dr. Romero?
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was up around 190 because after the 11% pay
Yes, I
increase,
think
you
it was
got
like
184. Well, I'm to agree with Mr. Smith on this.
So he's originally hired at what,
160
160?
something, yeah.
That in form of the motion? or-
No, he didn't make a motion. He just threw out a recommendation. Do you want to make the motion, Mr. Smith?
Ms. Garcia, we include in our job advertisement salary range of 160 to 180, depending on experience. I guess it would be the only word that we would need.
Got a motion by Mr. Smith, second.
I'll second that.
Mr. Bennett seconded. Any other discussion? Mr. Hidon,
Yes.
Mr. Vickers,
Yes,
Mr. Bennett,
Yes,
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
and I too vote yes. So we got a salary range, ladies.
Thank you.
What else do you need from us as far as the motion? You got the places to post, you've got the requirements, got the salary. Is that everything? We're gonna finalize the timeline.
We're gonna finalize the timeline and we are also going to get expenses for you, to get the numbers for you for the Ed Week and AESA. I guess my only other request would be that you approve our proposal so that we have board authority to speak on your behalf in terms of the advertisement and collecting applications.
Mr. Bennett has made a motion that we approve the proposal. And it's Paul and Associates is the name of the company?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it's a Paul and Associates LLC proposal with the Los Lunas School Board for the superintendent search beginning June of 2023. I have a motion by Mr. Bennett. Can I get a second?
Ms. Garcia,
Go ahead.
I would like to second based on advertisements and stuff like that, but that will all be determined with the board president and we are authorized to finalize the deal, so I will second that motion.
We got a motion and a second. Any other discussion or points of discussion? Okay, I'm gonna call for the vote. Mr. Hidon,
Yes.
Mr. Vickers,
yes,
Mr. Bennett,
yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
And I too vote yes. We've approved your proposal, ladies. Thank you. Thank you. Is that it? Okay,
Do you need us anymore?
I don't think so. I think I gotta call you tomorrow and give you some more information.
hopefully, like,
Yeah, I was gonna be next. So do you want me to sign the proposal now? And well, we gotta make copies and stuff. Can we do all that and get it to you? Okay, thank you. All right. Where are we? So the next part we have is discussion and approval of items as that were discussed at our retreat that discussed a communication plan. There is that document in your purple folder, gentlemen. The communication plan was created, I believe, by the superintendent. Everybody has had a copy of that. It happens back to our policies. Dr. Elder, you want to address this communication plan?
Sure, I'll be brief. At the board retreat, our facilitator took us through a process to create a communication plan. I think it's a very good thing to have in place in compliance with board policy, because it does make a public statement to any applicants that you'll have for the superintendent position that the board is following policy and being very clear about that relationship. So I see this one as something that will help us in our communication right now and as a jumping off point for the permanent superintendent. Of course, it can be changed later on, but we identified 4 areas. Board superintendent communication. We went through specifically the protocols for crisis communication, weekly emails, listing of date of athletic events and school events for dates, and an assurance that the superintendent will provide the board with an advanced copy of press releases when possible. The second section is in compliance with policy B3050 regarding board communications with staff members. Specifically, that board members will refer any concerns regarding staff directly to the superintendent. And the superintendent will then address those concerns with the appropriate supervisor. All communications with staff would go initially through the superintendent, not that they wouldn't have direct contact, but just so that the superintendent can keep track of everything that's being asked for. Board members will not give directives to principals, teachers, cabinet, or staff, nor will they encourage any staff to operate outside of the organizational structure. Board members who receive employment-related concerns from any district personnel will refer that person to the superintendent. Again, we talked about the metaphor of a tennis court, and there's the board side of the court, and there's the administrative side of the court. We come to the net to talk about it, but these are parameters that keep all of us on our side of the net. Any district personnel that brings an issue or concern to a board member will be directed back to the appropriate level, generally the staff member supervisor first, or moving up the chain of command. Also the ask that board members not visit a school unannounced unless it's a community related event. And this is just to protect the time of the school staff. If board members were to show up unannounced, they feel like they have to drop everything that they're doing and their very important work to spend time with the board member, and sometimes they may have other priorities, and so I want to be sure that we are honoring that. Section number 3 is regarding constituent concerns. There's reference to policy B3100. The goal here is that we want to maintain the strongest relationships between constituents, whether they be community or parents, with their teachers and with their school staff, and with their supervisors. So maintaining that strong direct relationship, when a constituent approaches a board member with a concern, the board member would then inquire if the constituent has attempted to address the issue at the closest level to the issue. If not, board members would refer them back to that closest level. And if the constituent has exhausted all direct communication, then the board member would direct the constituent to the superintendent. And then the assurance that the superintendent or the designee will handle constituent concerns in a timely manner. Finally, we discussed information requests. We've already kind of put into the practice that any information requested by a board member is provided to the full board. We talked about the 15-minute rule, that if there's a request for information that would require staff time to be redirected for more than 15 minutes, that would then be provided to the board chair to go to a board agenda to make sure that it's the will of the full board as a body. And finally, The superintendent may initiate a request for board members' questions on a specific upcoming agenda topic. And this is so that staff can be prepared and have adequate time to prepare any background information they may need so that they aren't caught with an ad hoc question or an ad lib question and not have the information at their fingertips to answer. So that concludes the draft of our communication plan.
Okay, board, I need a motion to accept the communication plan as written, or if there's any discussion to amendments. Yes, sir.
By Dr. Elder.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Smith and I got a second by Mr. Vickers. Do we need any other discussion on the item within the plan? Not hearing any. Mr. Hidon, how do you vote?
Yeah.
Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Smith, how do you vote?
I vote yes, and I want to commend Dr. Elder for putting that in a manner that is encapsulates exactly what we had to say. So that was a very good job. So I vote yes.
And I too vote yes, and it is putting our actions into a document that we all know and can follow. Thank you very much. Okay, so on the agenda, new business, board members, I need your request for topics for upcoming work sessions and or board meetings. Go ahead, I'll hear from whoever's got a topic. Okay, not hearing any. Of course, if you think of something after tonight's meeting, please reach out as soon as possible. I'm going to be working on this agenda tomorrow morning to try to get it placed and in the hands of staff so they can get it posted. So I would need to know tomorrow if somebody came up with something overnight. Announcement of meetings. This brings us to the announcement of meetings and item number 14 as allowed by the Open Meetings Act and the District Open Meetings Resolution. On occasion, a quorum of the board members attend the same function, including those held at school sites at district level, as well as sport functions and end of year activities and graduations. Board members will refrain from discussing and or acting on Los Lunas School Board of Education issues in those settings. In addition, only official meetings are published, and if other meetings are scheduled, they will be announced in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. With that being said, I would like to announce the following meetings. On June the 13th, the Finance Committee will meet here in the Central Office Boardroom at 3 p.m. On June 20th, there will be a board work session here at the Central Office Boardroom at 4 p.m. There is going to be some discussion regarding facilities master plan. This agenda may change and all parties will be notified as well as the public. Also on June 20th is our next regular board meeting, Central Office Boardroom at 6 p.m. I believe I stand for a motion to adjourn at this point.
So
Mr. Smith has made a motion. I got a second by Mr. Bennett. Any discussion on the adjournment? Mr. Hidon?
yes.
Mr. Bennett? Mr. Vickers?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
And I vote yes, motion, meeting is adjourned. 9.